Good evening. Thank you for your patience. We had a couple things we had to discuss in there. We have one more that we're going to go back in afterwards, but we're going to take care of the rest of the business out an open session here. So with that, we'll all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll go to agenda item D. So, pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. There are no motions, I take it, coming out of closed session. So we'll go to agenda item E, public communications, public agenda item E. So I'm going to read this statement again. At each monthly meeting, the regular board will afford members of the public who sign up during the designated time an opportunity to speak to the board on items listed or not listed on the agenda. And I will read this real quick. I think we have 7 or 8 not on the agenda. So at each regular meeting, the board will set aside 20 minutes to afford the general public an opportunity to speak to the board regarding matters of concern or interest to the district other than the character of any student, staff, or board member. Concerns or complaints regarding specific individuals should not be raised in public forum. They should be considered separately according to applicable board policies. The board requests that comments on any subject, whether positive or negative, be courteous and respectful. At the time the 20-minute limit is reached, the board will proceed to other business, and persons who have not yet spoken will be rescheduled to the latter part of the meeting in the public communication section. I'd like to remind the audience and the viewers that the comments of the speakers reflect their own positions or opinions. No audience member will be permitted to engage in any conduct that is disruptive or threatening toward any speaker or other person. The board cannot discuss or act upon any matter that is not listed under the action item portion of the agenda. Therefore, board members may not discuss the comments of speakers. Please understand that a lack of response from board members does not indicate agreement or approval of the comments. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. Ms. Gonzalez, Vice President of the Board, will be the designated timekeeper. There is a timer on top of the podium. We'd ask that you watch that, and she'll give you a notice as well. So with that, we'll go to our first, and these are, let's see, 1, 2, 8 on the not on the agenda. The first one is about the PTA. Beth Fitzmaurice. Okay. After that will be Janet Wilson. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Beth, and I'm here representing the Cedar Valley Middle School PTA, and we won the Round Rock feeder pattern megaphone at the last council PTA meeting. So I'm just here to tell you a few great things that the Cedar Valley Middle School PTA is doing. One is we have 707 members, which is excellent, so we're proud of that. And recently we did a canned food drive, and we donated over 4,000 cans to the Round Rock Area Serving Center, so we're proud of our students for that. We had 138 reflections entries, and 33 of those are going to be advancing to council judging, so we're proud of our students for that as well. We're doing a beautification project right now going along with several other schools that have the cups on their fence, so it's going to say it's going to have a Jaguar face and say "Go Jags" on it, just like a lot of the schools are supporting. So PTA paid for that and is trying to get that up without killing our hands. And let's see, we're having a Thanksgiving staff appreciation thing tomorrow, actually. We're donating 160 pies, our PTA members, and every person who works at Cedar Valley is going to be receiving a pie to take home for Thanksgiving. We try and do one give back a month, whether it's giving pies or doing a luncheon or something for the entire staff. Another time we did a teacher card signing project, and it was actually for the whole staff. We made cards, and the students signed them during lunch, showing their appreciation for everything that is done for them at school, and we gave those out. And Dr. Oldham, our principal, organized his first Jags Giving, which was actually yesterday, and he cooked over 55 pounds of chicken fajita meat for the staff to thank them for everything that they do. So go Cedar Valley!
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Fitzmaurice. Is that right? So, okay. Morris, okay. Thank you. Janet Wilson's next. After that will be Megan Stack. Thank you.
And I'm speaking on behalf of a group. May I have 5 minutes, please?
So we're still at the 5-minute, right? We're doing that? So, okay. I don't think we've changed it yet, have we? So you're for a group?
I'm just getting it in under the wire.
Okay, please raise your hand, all the group members. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. I'm here representing the Round Rock Dyslexia Group. We are a parent-led organization with over 200 members whose goal is to advocate for students with dyslexia. We thank the board for having an overview of dyslexia last month. We congratulate the district on having an in-district Wilson teacher trainer. Ms. Katie Bryan is a wonderful asset to the district. She would have worked with my two sons if their dyslexia had been identified in elementary school. However, my sons missed that opportunity, and I am passionate about the need for early identification for students with dyslexia. One of the items presented last month was universal screeners for dyslexia. Round Rock ISD uses the Ames Web Plus to identify students at risk for dyslexia or reading difficulties. It was reported that there are no formal process for how each campus support team reviews and acts on these results. I provided a copy of one of my son's Ames Web Plus. It shows a very low silent and oral reading fluency, but above average vocabulary and comprehension. The screeners at different ages look a little bit different. This is a middle school version of it. But because his vocabulary and comprehension were above average, this brings his reading composite score into the average range, identifying him at low risk. I chose his 8th grade report because it was presented in a way that's better visually. But in 7th grade, his scores mirrored this, but his fluency was lower. And he was also found to be at low risk because he compensated with his high vocabulary and his high comprehension. That same year, within a month of that test, we had our private testing done. That testing showed that his basic reading skills were in the 8th percentile and that he was dyslexic. The screener scored low risk, but should have been a red flag for my son that my son was struggling. It would have taken someone reviewing his results and looking beyond the reading composite score and the recommendation of the screener to see the clear discrepancy in his abilities. If there's no formal policy or structure to review screening results, we will continue to miss kids with disabilities and just waste district time and money. Ms. Gonzalez reported students who screen high risk in kinder and first grade would not necessarily have further dyslexia evaluation. These universal screeners are mandated in an attempt to identify students with disabilities at an age where dyslexia service interventions can have more meaningful impact on their education. Students whose reading difficulty is related to dyslexia will likely make some progress with some basic reading support, but they will continue to lag behind their peers until they're far enough behind that the district finally decides to test for dyslexia, likely years later, again wasting time and money. According to the Dyslexia Handbook, if interventions are not provided before the age of 8, the probability of reading difficulties continuing into high school is 75%. Child Find is part of the Individuals with Disability Education Act. It is a legal requirement that schools must evaluate any child that it knows or suspects may have a disability. I am not an education law attorney, but I'm very concerned about the liability of the district identifying students at high risk for dyslexia and failing to evaluate and provide services for that disability. Ms. Gonzalez stated last month that identifying a student with a lifelong disability is not a bad thing, but not a small thing either. I can tell you, failure to identify a student with a disability has huge social, emotional, and educational consequences. We have been pleading with the district to create a committee, which includes community members, to address areas of improvements needed in dyslexia identification and services, similar to what other districts do. We were provided the opportunity to have meetings with Ms. Estes and other members of administration, but the director of dyslexia and their superintendent have not attended those meetings. Our group found those meetings helpful and the start of a process to work together on improving services. In the last month, the director of dyslexia has declined meeting with us as a group. We were informed that the district is securing an independent outside consultant to conduct a review of their dyslexia program. While we welcome a review from an outside agency, as parents, we can help the district identify areas of improvement that are needed. We're offering those services for free. We just need the district to be willing to meet with us and a format for that communication other than standing up here every month talking for 3 to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Next up will be Megan Stack, after which will be Jeanine McNulty.
Okay, hi. First of all, I said the Pledge of Allegiance, and I memorized it, and I haven't done that since I was 8. so I'm pretty proud of myself for that. I just have to throw that out there. My name is Megan Stack, and I have 3 daughters, 2 at Caraway and 1 at Canyon Vista. I'm here in support of my fellow Caraway parents. They're here to talk about the overcrowding issue at Caraway. I'm in full support of that, as it's legit and quite tight at Caraway. I also want to say that we have loved our experience at Caraway and Canyon Vista. The teachers, the principal, the community, the PTA is awesome. I couldn't ask for a better school situation. I am here to address a very real concern at Canyon Vista, which is the fact that we're losing our RSO, our officer, on campus. I did not go to the meeting at Canyon Vista in which that was told to all the parents, but they informed me of that, and the principal said that that has not changed. I emailed her, and she said yes, that the officer would be done in December. And I'm just here to say that us parents at Canyon Vista think that's highly irresponsible and very dangerous, especially in today's culture of school shootings that seem to be happening all the time. Safety and security should be top priority for us all. These are our children we're talking about. I feel like they're sitting ducks at these schools. We need to have at least 1 officer at all the middle schools, if not more, and the high schools. So I implore you to do whatever you need to do, working with the city, the countings. I know that there's trouble there, and that's unfortunate, but it needs to get done. We need to work on that so we have our officer at the middle school. That is all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stack. Next up will be Janine McNulty.
All right, hi again. My name is Janine McNulty. I'm representing Round Rock ISD Voices for a Sustainable Future. We're a growing group of over 300 Round Rock ISD parents, students, employees, and community members. Our group's purpose is to promote and hasten the adoption of a modern, district-wide environmental sustainability policy that will build sustainability into operations and education throughout Round Rock ISD. Our goals include the elimination of styrofoam lunch trays, development of a district waste reduction plan that is measurable and comprehensive, and evaluation of all district rooftops for solar. We're here again to demonstrate our ongoing commitment to engaging in this important conversation and to again ask for a standing advisory committee on sustainability. We understand that the Budget, Innovation, and Policy Committee will be discussing this at their December 5th meeting, and we want to thank the board for placing that on the committee agenda. I'd like to share a recent experience that illustrates the difficulty with which multi-campus sustainability initiatives are met in Round Rock ISD currently. As part of our group's efforts, we seek to identify and connect with sustainability champions at campuses across the district. If we produced a flyer, we thought we could easily get the word out by using the district's e-flyer system. However, we found that current policy restricts us from distributing a flyer unless we are a registered nonprofit or a for-profit business providing a youth program. So there is currently no way to even make people aware that there is a group interested in pursuing sustainability available to them in the district. Though we can and will go through PTAs at individual schools, only a small portion of the learning community is reached through a PTA flyer distribution. And keep in mind that PTA membership does not reflect overall demographics at many schools. It largely excludes economically disadvantaged families and families of color. Ironically, these families are more likely to be negatively impacted by the effects of climate change. And furthermore, these families have less ability to take sustainable actions of their own, such as providing a zero-waste lunch for their child instead of a school lunch served on one of the estimated 25,000 styrofoam trays Round Rock ISD currently landfills every day. So as you can see, the absence of a district-wide mechanism for communicating about sustainability is a significant barrier to any serious effort to improve in this area. A standing advisory committee on sustainability would be able to report and promote its efforts district-wide, which would be a big first step forward. Thanks for your continued consideration.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McNulty. Next up is Esteban Zarate. Is that right? And after that will be Julie Starrick. Okay.
Hello, magistrates. I am here to talk about the Pond Springs Elementary PTA and the things that we've been up to. we're a very, very happy little community over there at Pond Springs, and we like to brag about it. We started out the school year this year welcoming back our teachers with a staff breakfast that we cooked from the community, brought it. It was great. Everybody enjoyed it. We also have a back-to-school event during Meet the Teacher. During the summer, we host multiple kinder play dates, good opportunity for new families in the community to come out and get to know each other. And like I said, community is what our school is all about. This is my president right here, who's obviously predisposed. We do a talk over tacos. We do parent info nights. We put out a calendar of events for the first semester, so parents that are newer have that at their ready. Support the Watchdogs program, monthly spirit nights at local restaurants, reflections program workshops where people from the community come together and work together to create art. And that led to 7 ready for council judging for us. We have a room leader meeting, networking. We do movie nights. In October, we showed Nightmare Before Christmas. We had a ton of families come out. We almost had to turn people away. We do the Fall Fest every year, and that's a huge community effort. We sold sponsorships, had a huge silent auction, and a fantastic carnival that I hope some of y'all got to attend. People are still talking about the street corn from the food court, so you missed out. Let's see. We have free family yoga nights. One was in November. The next one's in a few weeks. And our family culture night's coming up December 5th, which is going to be a celebration of the different cultures that are represented in our community for an evening. Other than that, we have holiday parties coming up. Our big Apex Fun Run in the spring. Use book sale that's open to the whole community, so we don't throw away books. Donuts with dads and mornings with moms for the respective holidays, but don't include necessarily just moms and dads, more like parent identifying people. You're welcome to come, which is great. We're all about inclusivity there. We installed 2 new water fountains over the summer with bottle fillers, which we highly recommend to anybody who can do that. We're installing 2 more of them. The kids love them, even to play with them a little bit. Sorry, Principal. We're also able to fund an extensive wish list every year, which is great. Now, the numbers, you want to talk about numbers. We've got 575 total enrollment, which all of you know because you know our enrollment. But our membership for PTA is 420, which is over 70% representation. And we think that's pretty fantastic and something to amplify. So thank you for your time. Y'all have a nice evening.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Zarte. Thank you. Up next is Julie Stark, I think. Is that right? This will be our last speaker for the agenda's speakers not on the agenda. So.
Got it. Right under the wire. I'm Julie, and I'm from Anderson Mill Elementary. There are great things happening at Anderson Mill Elementary. We are a diverse campus. We have economic diversity. We have racial diversity. We have just about every kind of diversity. We are a Title I school, but we have a PTA of 240 parents, which is an accomplishment. We had a multicultural night where families brought in food from their culture and all the other kids got to taste it. We had an affordable carnival. Our wristbands were $7, and we had a great turnout for our families. We have a backpack program that's run by our local seniors. We have community involvement that is amazing. So we have the backpacks. We have a watchdog program with 12 dads that show up every morning. We have one of our 7-foot dads that used to play basketball. I saw him bend down and tie a kindergartner's shoes this morning because they were awesome. We have the clothes closet, the Round Rock Clothes Closet on our campus to make sure that we have clothes for all of our kids. We've gotten $5,000 worth of grants to do green and healthy living. We also have partnerships with our Eagle Scouts. One of them did a little free library, and there's going to be free books for the kids. So if they lose their library books and they lose privileges at the library, they can still have books. And we have a garden that was built by another one of our Eagle Scouts. And today we were on the news. I have a first grader. All the first graders donated to the homeless and packed packages for them. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ms. Stark. Appreciate it. All right.
Oh, and I'm sorry. You have a great new principal.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the comments. We always love to hear those. So appreciate that. We'll go back to follow up on the agenda here. We are through public communications for items not on the agenda. We do have some more speakers later, but we'll get to those when we get to the agenda item. So with that, we'll go to Agenda Item F, Superintendent's Report, Student Outcome Goals, Constraint Progress Measures. Dr. Flores.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, community, we do have our focuses on student outcomes, and tonight we will look at Constraint Progress Measures 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. And without further ado, I'll turn this over to Dr. Presley.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. President Chadwell, members of the board, as Dr. Flores said, we are really focused on our progress measures, and tonight we're going to highlight some of those that I know are very important to the board, and you'll be glad to hear about to get an update tonight. I worked together with Mandy Estes in Teaching and Learning in my division, Schools and Innovation, with frequent campus visits with our area superintendents that are doing a super job to keep our eye constantly on this data. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Malerba that will share an update right now of where we are today. Remember, we'll be doing this throughout the year, but tonight Kathy's going to share with you a snapshot of where we are here in November.
Good evening, trustees and Dr. Flores. As stated, we'll be looking at our constraint progress measures 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 tonight for the first time. We'll also see these again for progress update in April. I just want to contextualize this a little bit and remind everybody that these constraints are a carryover from our previous district improvement plan from 2018-19. However, in the Lone Star governance model, they really fit better because they weren't focused on student outcomes as much as decreasing student exclusionary removals from the classroom. So they have not changed in terms of baselines, goals, and targets. And as you probably remember or noticed when we were working on the plan, this is the only outcome that has an end date of 2021. So we retained the original 3-year timeline on this one. And I also want to just point out that this is focusing on a pretty narrow range of disciplinary outcomes, those that result in the removal through in-school, out-of-school, or suspension, or removal to a disciplinary alternative education setting. And that's important because after I go through the data and I hand it over to Ms. Fink, she'll be talking about the district's overarching social and emotional learning plan, which is designed to address a lot more than just these constraints. So we expect all of those activities to have an outcome here. We also expect them to have an impact on other types of referrals. And all of our principals have ongoing dashboards available to them. And if you just pop on and look at the district level, you can see that all types of referrals have declined over the last couple of years because of this work. So just very quickly, some orientation to the data. As I mentioned, we're in working a 3-year goal. Last year was year 1. This year's year 2. This is a cumulative type of goal. So in April, you'll see that we continue to add removals, but we also continue to add students. We don't take any students out of the denominator. If you're here at any time during the year, you'll be in these data. There are unique counts per student, campus, and removal type, but a student can also be in different types of removals. So if you go to ISS twice, you'll be in the count for ISS one time, unique to that count. But if you also go to OSS, you'll be in the OSS count and the ISS count. Just wanted to make sure you understood that. Students don't move in and out of special education too much, but if they did, their special education status would be as of the report date. If a student is in partial and full ISS or OSS, it just counts one time. And the DAEP codes, we learned something interesting as we were preparing everything for you. A lot of different types of removals count, including some carryovers from the prior year. So when you look at the Opportunity Center counts, those counts include DAEP placements from last year that were continued into this year. And that's consistent with state reporting for discretionary removals, although all of these were all required removals. Okay, so we'll start with Constraint Progress Measure 2.1, which is removal to in-school suspension. As of the report date, all of the student groups no one had exceeded the target for the year, so that's good. Likewise, with out-of-school suspension, we have no student group had exceeded the target for the school year. And with removals to the the disciplinary alternative education program, we did have one group go over target, but as you can see, oh my goodness, this is not the mass data. So I'm going to change that. Sorry, I made a correction and introduced a different error. So there was a very small group of students, obviously, that were referred, and that can throw off a percentage pretty quickly. So that will continue to probably stay over target for the rest of the year. And as a board, you can just decide on how you'd like to handle that in terms of evaluating the final results. So I do want to talk to you because I've received a lot of feedback about the way that we're monitoring the DAEP removals. And I've had a number of administrators and principals suggest to me that maybe it would be more fair and actionable to focus on discretionary removals. This is also consistent with state reports that we receive each year that look at that. They do not evaluate the required removals in the same way. So this chart is showing you, again, year to date, the percentage of placements at the DAEP by student group that was big enough to display that are discretionary versus mandatory. And you can see the discretionary numbers are the minority of these. The vast majority are required and therefore not quite as actionable by campus staff. So what we have for your consideration is a change of the target, not the timeline, but the target. And we re-looked at the numbers from the baseline year to determine what the district level average, and it was 0.4% would have been the average for the whole district. Looked at the student group baselines, although I'm only displaying the recommended targets here. And so for your consideration, we want to know if we can make an adjustment to track discretionary placements going forward for the remainder of the plan. So that's my question to you. And then, of course, I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Any questions, Mr. Math?
Yeah, thank you. Just trying to understand the data. Mm-hmm. So if we go to slide 3.
Okay.
The numbers all look favorable to the target.
Yes.
But should the way that I should interpret this be to say, well, we're about a third of the way through the year, so I should really multiply by 3 to see, to
Yes.
kind of annualize it?
Yes, sir. That is exactly the way to think about it. And in fact, I did do that myself and shared that data just with Dr. Presley because he had the same question. Okay, we're on target right now, but are we on target for the end of the year?
Yeah.
And so he's probably had a little time to reflect on that. I mean, I can just share with you what I saw, which was that for every student group, we're almost every student group looking very good in OSS. A couple of student groups, if they continued to be removed at the same rate, we would be above target. And then the DAEP would be the same thing. However, if we move to just the discretionary removals, nearly every student group would probably be expected to meet target at the end of the year. So I know that's a little vague, and you don't have it in front of you, but yes, we did look at that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Weir?
Well, actually, I kind of had the same question because when I looked at your numbers for like African American and special education, if you multiply those by, if that's just a third, then those two groups are really not on target to meet their
That's
goals.
for ISS. That's
for
correct.
ISS, right? And I know it's not, part of our goals. And I guess as we move forward and we start tweaking it, one of the concerns that I have when I look at these numbers is if there's 4,600, almost 4,700 African American students, but that 104 is actually a fourth, basically, of all the referrals. So, 7%, 8% of the kids are getting 25% of the ISS. I mean, am I reading that? Or Right, because it's
Oh, the
410
104.
Yeah, so there's 410 total.
Yes,
so
you
100
are reading that correctly. So that's one of the ways that you can look at disproportionality, of course, which is the ultimate goal. The target for the year is an interim target, though, so it's a little higher than for the other groups because getting to the district average is the goal for 2021. So yes, you're noticing correctly disproportionality there.
And the same with the special ed was kind of the same.
Yes.
And so as we move into, so next year, our goals are going to be individualized for each group, right? And they're, okay, well, I guess.
Actually, in the end of 2021, so not very far away, the target is parity with the rest of the district for every student group. This one has a much quicker timeline than our other Lone Star goals.
Okay.
Mr. Moses and then Ms. Feller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you much for the presentation and data. A few questions. So I think in line with Trustee Math and Trustee Ward's questions about, so historically looking back, do you know how many of the students who go to ISS one time typically go back a second time?
I have not looked at ISS as closely as I've looked at DAEP.
That's the same question.
But we could certainly look that up for you. Typically, students only go to the DAEP one time per year. There is a small minority of kids who would go more than once, but most kids go once and do not go again.
Yeah, kind of. I know that's the goal, and sometimes
Yes.
students do make mistakes and a reason to go, but the hope is once they leave, they don't come back. And the same thing for ISS and even OSS. So what are we doing? You probably are going to get into this in the second half of the presentation. So if that's the case, just say we'll get to that. What are we doing to help those students who are in ISS, OSS, DAEP, help them hear the things you can do, we can work on together to not come back?
Do you want to take that? We will? Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Feller, then Ms. Vessa.
So I'm going to wait for the second half and hold off my question, too.
Ms. Vessa.
Sorry. My question, I think that the message that I want to say is that we're encouraging the district to do everything we can to make sure that we're utilizing the least amount of classroom time out for disciplinary responses. But there are cases where it's appropriate. And I feel like if we don't meet our targets, then we need to have some type of maybe like an audit type. Okay, we went over, but were they justified? I don't want our teachers and administrators to feel like that these targets are going to define their disciplinary response. And that they, in a situation where they really need these tools, they can't use them because we're going to go over our targets. So I feel like in those cases, but at the same time, we also are sending the message that this is not really, we want to use every other method that we can. This is not our preferred method. So that's kind of what I'm throwing out there, for our board, for the administration to consider an audit of, okay, if we're going over, let's review why we're going over. Maybe by auditing it, we can see, okay, this is where we can improve.
So I got a question, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Moses, but kind of related to that, if I jump in, is explain the difference between OSS and DAEPE. So I always thought in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and is that just for a few days normally, but DAEP is for very strict, there's strict guidelines for DAEP, right?
No, in-school suspension is an in-school suspension room. Typically, OSS is when you're sent home for a maximum of 3 days. By law, you can't be suspended for more than 3 days. And then DAEP is when you're enrolled in the Round Rock Opportunity Center for whatever period of time, depending on the offense you committed. And you can go there for discretionary reasons. And then the mandatory reasons, as Dr. Malova points out, are ones that by law you have to go to DAEP. If you have drugs at school, you're selling drugs, bring a weapon, things like that, serious offenses are mandatory. And that's what we've really worked on, the discretionary placements. We work on the mandatory too, because as we improve relationships and the ability to work with all of our kids, we hope the mandatory goes down as well. But the discretionary is there's a process where the principal will contact their area superintendent, others in the district, and make a decision. So you can't, and usually discretionary placements are for multiple, over and over again. You've tried ISS, you've been suspended from school, the behavior hasn't changed. And those are things that I think Ms. Fink will get into as some of the programs that we're doing. I'm really optimistic, and I go back to we've got to do better with everybody. But I think most districts, especially districts our size, would envy the numbers that we have, because when you look at, if you look at the denominator, like if you look at our special ed population, we have 5,328 students. 103 have gone to ISS. Well, another way of looking at that is 5,225 have not been in any kind of trouble. And that's really pretty phenomenal, based on my experience. It doesn't mean we can't do better with the 103 that have been to ISS, but our numbers as a district are really low, as a whole. When you look at a district with 51,000 students and the number of kids that go to DAP, it's really low in comparison to other districts our size. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we have amazing kids in this district, and our principals and all of our folks on our campuses, our teachers, are developing new and better ways to work with all kids so that these numbers continue to go down and continue the trend that we've had for the last few years.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have another question. I know we talked about is the right way to look at this for kind of do times 3 and we get there. But is there a busy season? Is like the first of the year typically where we see more these types of behavioral issues, or do we see them more as we're going into that near the holidays, or they get back from the holidays? Just wasn't sure if there was. They're kids. I mean, they're going to be.
The week before spring break is usually pretty hectic. But there are spikes during the year, and there are occasions where things happen where a group of kids do something, so you have sort of a phenomenon where a lot of kids get in trouble for something pretty serious altogether. But I think it's pretty much throughout the year. It does pick up a little bit second semester. But I think with the new strategies we're putting in place, restorative practices, some of our campuses are using reverse ISS, where kids, instead of going to ISS, they send the ISS facilitator into the classroom where the kids that have done something inappropriate, they're monitoring the kids and watching the kids, and that's been pretty effective. So there are a lot of strategies and a lot of creativity on our campuses to continue to reduce these numbers. But I think in any school district, you'll probably see a little increase in the spring of kids that are just ready for summer, ready for spring break, ready for summer. But there are certain occasions where something happens where a lot of kids are involved in something that requires sometimes a lot of mandatory placements in DAP, for example.
And I think you asked the question about whether or not we want to go on slide 7 about recommending adjust the constraints. I'll just provide my 2 cents. Others can with the same. I think it's important to still track the mandatory just so we have those figures. But I do think, at least for I think, discretionary is where we really want to, in my mind, it's important to focus on, because that's where you have discretion. That's where you can work with the principal, work with the student, work with the other people involved to make sure that they've done everything they can before the student gets into DAEP. So I'll let others weigh in on that, but I think track them both, but this is the heart that we're trying to get at.
And I'll echo that, and then I'll wrap up real quick and go to the next. But I agree. I think both of you, if I understand you right, and Ms. Vessa, is I don't want to put a limit that if there's an issue that needs to be, because I don't want to ever have other students or teachers feel like they're threatened or being disruptive and they can't get their work done. So, again, I think that goes back to the discretionary part. So, again, all right, thank you.
And we've all, in not knowing which way the board might want to go, we did already go ahead and do the programming so that we'll report mandatory and discretionary each time. So you'll still see the two tracking.
Okay.
Can I just ask real quick on, and I don't know who, maybe this is Dr. Flores, when the recommended targets for the I guess discretionary, how did those come about? The easiest one for me was like on the African American, the target for all of them was 1.6, but then for discretionary was 0.8, half of that. But it looks like most of the discretionary is maybe 25%. So,
well, you just want to know how I did it, or how I got these numbers?
How you came up with the goal number? Yeah.
Yes. Well, if in the written report, if you will go to, I think it's I'm sorry, I can't remember which table it is, but it's in the front section. I had the baselines and annual targets for all three constraints plus the new recommended constraint. So that will show you the baseline from 2018, the target that would have been in place last year, the target for this year, and the final
And was that
outcome for
because
next
it wasn't
year.
with this? So it was in the extra thing that we got on Friday.
Yes, ma'am, in
Okay.
the full written report.
Okay.
So yes, it's there.
Okay.
And I calculated it exactly the same way as if it had been the original measure in the baseline year.
Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I just want to, again, I think this slide's important because it does show that probably about 40 kids out of over 51,000 have had to go to a DAEP, which, you know, everyone's going to always wish that number was 0, but the fact that it is 40, it is remarkable, and it does show we have great students and great teachers that are working together to try and prevent these types of placements. So I do want to commend our staff and teachers who work with our students daily to make sure they're providing the support they need to continue to, and also kudos to our parents because it starts at home. We have great families that work conjointly with our with our teachers and staff. So this just highlights we have a great community, great parents, great teachers helping our students behave and be the great kids that they are.
You ready?
Okay, Ms. Vessa.
Okay.
Do we have to vote on that change tonight? Is it posted for that?
I don't think.
Okay, so that would be a future agenda item to change that. Okay, thank you.
And one more question I did have here, wrote down, kind of related. Self-identified and low income, you don't break that down in that. Did I miss that?
Not for this constraint because, as I mentioned, it had already been in place. We just took it over wholesale, and the focus was on disparities by race, ethnicity group, and for special education. So the original goal did not look at ECODIS specifically.
Okay, and just for clarification, if you go back a slide or two, everybody self-identifies, is that correct?
Race, ethnicity is identified at registration time by parents, and special education is whether a student has an IEP or not.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay.
So then students that have a 504 would not be included in that cohort group?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we are going to talk about how we have really worked to change the way we look at student behavior from a reactive model where we are waiting until behaviors occur to address them to more of a proactive model where we are really providing students with skills before they become an issue and providing them with things like coping strategies or emotional regulation tools or conflict resolution skills. And the biggest way that we have done that is through our social emotional learning in Round Rock ISD. In 2017, we enacted a district-wide framework that is universal across all 55 of our campuses. We have amazing campuses in our district that are doing amazing things. All 55 of those campuses look very different. So to say everybody will work in lockstep is unrealistic. But what this framework does is it says, here are 5 big buckets of social emotional learning that really works from more than just a curriculum or a program to every decision a student could encounter from the time they walk in the building to the time they go home. From the climate and culture of our campus. Is it a safe and supportive learning environment for every single individual? Not just our students, but our staff and our parents and our community members that come onto that building? Is it a place where you feel that you want to be there? Are there strong expectations for students? Have they been clearly communicated in a positive way? One of the very first things we did in working with PBIS was having a conversation of, instead of saying, no, don't do something, tell me what I need to do. Tell me what you want that to look like so that I know what that next step needs to be. And I'm using more of an asset-based mindset as opposed to a deficit mindset. Similarly, explicit instruction is another big skill. We can just talk climate and culture all day long. But the minute we enact explicit instruction, we are actually teaching skills to students. Within social emotional learning, there are 5 main core competencies, and they cover everything from self-awareness, that idea of do I know who I am as an individual? That's growing from the time students are in pre-K all the way to the time they're a senior in high school and beyond. To self-management. Do I know how to regulate myself? Do I have those tools where I can say, okay, I'm feeling really stressed right now, or I'm feeling really agitated, and here are some things that I can do. Social awareness is another big component of that. Do I know
Can I put myself in somebody else's shoes? This is where things like compassion and empathy become critical. This is where a lot of our opportunities around diversity and inclusivity and equity really become conversations we can have with students. Also, relationship skills, which every time we talk about conflict resolution and we talk about conflict management, we're talking about relationship skills. And that also encompasses things like dating relationships and friendships, and how do I join a group, and how do I say, like, I don't really want to play with anybody right now, I just want to play by myself, and that's okay. And then that responsible decision making. If I have to make a decision, do I have multiple ways to make that happen? Throughout the district, we use multiple ways to do that. To say we are only going to use one curriculum would say we'd be doing ourselves a disservice, because there are lots of different things that are out there. Predominantly throughout the district, we use second step, pre-K through 8, and we will talk about that here in a little bit. But we also find places that are in our curriculum, or we find places where there are spots that our counselors are doing guidance lessons. And so it's just this comprehensive view of how are we explicitly teaching skills in the same way we teach math and in the same way we teach science, so that students are really getting more than just the shot in the arm, if you will. Staff social emotional learning is incredibly important, because we know that if we want students and parents to feel safe and supported, our staff have to feel that same way too. And the example that I often use is, if I know what anger management looks like as an adult, I can very quickly intervene and I can have that conversation and talk through those processes and those procedures. And so giving staff tools for themselves, but also for them to experience some skills, is incredibly important. Academic integration takes the explicit instruction that they're teaching and that they're learning and ties it to the curriculum, because there are very natural places where these two places align very nicely, and how do we make that intentional? So we're doing a lot of work with our curriculum team that we'll talk about here in a second to really kind of try those two gaps together. And our last one is parents, families, and communities, because we know that people come on our campuses every single day, and we want them to feel just as excited and just as safe and supported and warm and welcome every single time they walk in the building. And when they go home, that they have tools that if they need them as well. And we're continuing that conversation, and we're creating a space where everybody feels safe and supported as well. So this year specifically, and this really talks about the work we have done this year. I have been in this position since 2016, and I'm proud to say that we have done great work. But I wanted to really focus on the work we have done this year, because I feel like we have been incredibly intentional about combining and really, for my Apple Watch users, like, we've closed a lot of the circles, if you will. We've closed a lot of the gaps. There are campus-wide initiatives happening across the board. So we've got things like kindness campaigns happening across the district. But that's that one-time thing. We also have campuses where there are really strong opportunities for students to learn the 7 habits, and for students to really take a morning meeting approach. So in elementary, we use a morning meeting framework where we start the day in a community circle where students are hearing, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm excited about, this is what this looks like, and we're creating a space where I have that opportunity, and that happens across the entire campus. This is a place where restorative practices is also happening a lot, and we will specifically talk about that in a second, because it really needed its own place and really did kind of tap out what that looks like. The explicit instruction of SEL competencies that we talked about earlier, we are at a place where in 2016, when I started in this position, there was only 10 campuses using an aligned curriculum. To date, we are at, in every single pre-K classroom, 28 campuses are using it pre-K through 5, and then all middle schools and the Opportunity Center are using it as well. So we're seeing more of an alignment where it needs to be in place. Next year, we've already had 2 campuses say, like, not necessarily for this year, but next year we are absolutely going to make that happen. And so I've gotten that spot already spelled aside, where we will talk through professional development in the summer. We will talk through what that needs to look like, where that will probably be at about 32 campuses at the beginning of next year, working towards 34 if that's where we need to be. We are working very closely with our parent university to provide skills for that last bubble that you saw. So things like, how do I go home and talk to my kids? Because when I ask my kids, how was school today? The response is usually, fine. So how do we then evoke a little bit more so that parents are getting some tools as well? So that you might ask the question like, well, what was one thing that was really exciting for you today? It's not really a question you can answer with a yes or a no or a fine. to give them a little bit more that they can, just some tools that they have at their disposal as well. And things that we're using in the classrooms that might be really beneficial, that if we're using a language that is being really helpful with kids, is there a way that maybe parents can use this as well? And vice versa. We take opportunities to learn from our parents all the time. This year, we have launched the SEL Rocks Professional Development Cohort. There are about 50 teachers in that opportunity that meet every 3 weeks, and we do a deep dive into what social emotional learning looks like, both in the classroom and in the school at large. And they really go back and they become SEL champions for their campuses, and they deepen this work within the work that not only that they are doing within the walls of their classroom, but within their entire campus. The SEL monthly newsletter became, it was a background project for mine for a couple of years, but this year it really became forefront as like, we're going to make this happen. And what I found was I was doing a really great job doing professional development in August, and then life happened and all the things happened, and it really wasn't a way that we were combining all of those conversations together. But through the newsletter, it's really keeping that conversation alive. So in August and September, it was that conversation around how do you start the year strong? How do you build those restorative relationships? In October, it was not necessarily just like getting through October, but thriving in October. October is usually a month where we're like, we just got to make it through. But it was really, how do I make that happen in an opportunity? Last month was all about empathy. So how do I teach empathy, which isn't a skill that I can actually teach, but how do I then teach it in the classroom? And so really just keep that conversation going. So far to date, we've had 450 hours of professional development offered district-wide. That is not necessarily encompassing of the work that's happening on individual campuses. That is just the work that is happening across the district, because this is happening every single day on our campuses as well. We will update that number as we get to the end of the year with individual campus PD, and that number will probably hit closer to about 750 to 800 hours just throughout the course of the year. Some of the things that we have done specifically this year to move towards that continuous improvement for next year is allocating another half. So the half-time drug and alcohol counselor at the Rock had only been there for a half of a position. It is now a full-time position, serving students that have been, for some of those mandatory placements, what are some ways that we're intervening in a much more proactive way, or in a much more way where when they come to the Opportunity Center, they're receiving intensive mental health counseling to really say, like, why am I addicted to whatever I'm addicted to, or what choices have I made? And then they follow that student back to their home campus as well. We have 5 behavior coaches that serve one of each of our 5 learning communities. And so if a campus is struggling with a student, they're like, I've tried everything, I just don't know what to do, they have another person that they can pick up the phone and they can call and they can say, I'm not quite sure, can you come observe? And it just provides another set of eyes looking at a student to say, here are some strategies. Here are some things that we might be able to try. And then there's coaching that happens with both with campuses and with teachers as well. And so how do we really make those components just kind of work together in a more cohesive way? Because sometimes you just need somebody else to come and say, have you thought about? And if you're in the middle of the work, you might not have thought about different things. We're also working very closely with a company called Emergent Tree Education. They are a behavior-focused campus, or a behavior-focused company that has worked very closely with many of our campuses over about the last 8 years. They've served about half of our campuses in a variety of capacity, whether that's with one-time professional development on things like functions of behavior or science of behavior, to ongoing coaching. In this role, they are solely serving a consultancy role where they are coming in almost for us as that other set of eyes of, we've got district and campus stakeholders coming together about once a month to examine our current behavior systems and our current systems as a whole to say, how can we create a really strong multi-tiered system of support for behavior and create really strong alignment so that there isn't a question of when behavior happens, who do I call, or when behavior happens, what do I do? Because a lot of this work is so, there's a lot of crossover, right? So between my work and counseling services and our behavior coaches, it all kind of comes together to serve the same purpose, but can get really muddy sometimes when you're in the work. So how do you kind of navigate that? And so we're working through that as a whole as well. In the last probably 2 years, we have seen restorative practices really take off across the district. Restorative practices is not anything new in the state of education, but the phrase restorative practices is new in the world of education. But it really takes the idea of how do I move from that punitive, you've done something, so I'm going to lay the hammer to you, and that's going to be the end of the conversation, to how do I teach, and how do I model, and how do I help students make better choices when behavior occurs? Because it is not a matter of if. Just as you said, Trustee Moses, we have kids. They make mistakes. But we know that ISS, OSS, and DAEP don't fix anything in and of themselves. But the opportunity to teach and the opportunity to have conversations and to say, this is how somebody else was impacted by the choices that were made is what can make the difference. If I have to hear someone else say, well, when you did this, it made me feel X, Y, or Z, I have to hear that and I have to internalize that. So to lay kind of the foundation for you as to where we've been, last year we spent a lot of time really raising administrator awareness and doing a lot of training for administrators. We did a district-wide book study on the book itself. It's called Better Than Carrots or Sticks, which is all about restorative practices in the classroom. We're doing a couple more this year that expand upon that work with some specialized groups, but that campus was open, or that book study was open to anybody in the district that wanted to join. And then we offer campus support and classroom support. And so last spring, we offered 2 specific trainings to anybody in the district who wanted to attend. You want to attend? Come on. And we said, if you're a campus that's wanting to do this in the fall, I would highly suggest you send a team so they can kind of dabble in it, if you will, and get their feet wet. And in doing that, that's where you're seeing the numbers that you are. So in 2017, before we were really having really intentional conversations around this work, we were maybe at 2 to 3. We're at now, at the time that this was put together, we were at 23 campuses usually using this work with intentionality outside of just their administrative team. If I were to update that number to where we are today, we would be at 25 campuses with more planned for the spring. But also, if I were to update that number to say where we are in terms of number of people that have been, like anybody on my campus has been trained, that would encompass the majority of our staff or the majority of our campuses, if not all of them, just because we have cast such a wide net to say, if you are interested, please come. We will work. We will do this work together to really start this work as a district so that we can then continue to move forward and gain the capacity that we have. The thing that's been really helpful is as we've tracked some numbers, we have seen a decrease in indiscipline across the board. So the example that I often use, Grisham Middle School started this work in, they were one of the beginning of the year 2018, 2019 campuses. No, 2017, 2018 campuses, excuse me. That year, they saw a 58% decrease in their discipline referral data that year alone. The next year, they saw a 25% decrease in discipline. So as they implemented with intentionality, we are seeing the payoff on the back end. We're seeing less kids being referred. But the kids that are being referred for things that it's not a lot more of the classroom managed small behaviors. They're things that kind of become the referable behaviors, if you will, like you said. Things are going to happen that we're going to have to address. And so that's what's kind of coming out in these conversations. But as we're also kind of closing a lot of those gaps and we're giving teachers more skills, they're able to either regulate themselves, because even as a parent, as you know, when you're frustrated, you kind of snap a little bit more quickly as well. The same thing happens in the classroom sometimes. And so when teachers feel a little bit more, they have a little bit more self-regulation, or they feel like they've got some skills, then we see that happening less and less as well. And so that's been a combination of either we've contracted that training, or like I have provided that training, or one of our behavior coaches has provided that training for staff. It just depends on what a campus is open to, because sometimes you need somebody else from the outside. Sometimes you want Rochelle to come do it, and it's totally up to campuses as to what they use, but all of those training models are aligned in and of themselves. So that is where we are at as of January 21st, 2019. What questions do you have?
Good questions, Ms. Gonzalez and Ms. Vessa.
So I love how you started out. You said that Round Rock ISD is using a proactive model instead of addressing social emotional learning after the fact, and that sometimes is more reactive. Going back to the training and the professional development, you said that 450 hours of professional development is offered. Are we tracking what staff is doing what and what is mandatory and what is not.
So with that 450 specifically is hours that either I have coordinated or that I have given. And I can provide you with that, like almost like a catalog of what that encompasses. But that would include things like classroom management, things like trauma-informed classroom ideas. Things like restorative practices are included in that as well. So those pieces that we've done are included in there. I'm not necessarily tracking what's mandatory versus what's optional, but with something we could.
Right. It just seems like you're doing great things, and I just hope everybody is taking advantage of that.
Let me make myself a note.
Ms. Fessa, then Ms. Weir.
So a question that I had posed to you all was what we're doing in high schools. Because I know just from my experience having children who've come through elementary and middle school that there's a lot of emphasis on social emotional learning and restorative practice. I mean, my kids went to Grisham, so I got that experience behind me. But as my first year in high school, not that my son tells me anything, but what are we doing in high school?
So at high school, that's where restorative practices are really becoming kind of what social emotional learning looks like. Not only are we teaching those relational strategies to teachers, things like greeting your kids at the door and being really intentional about starting that day off with a really positive mindset, but also using restorative practices. So in those 23 campuses includes 4 of our 5 high schools. That fifth one is laying a lot more of that foundational work to add that layer later. I was actually at a high school campus today that was talking about the work that they're doing, and their kids are begging for circles and restorative practices in the classrooms because it provides me as a student to have a space where I have a voice, which sometimes doesn't happen in a high school curriculum, in a high school space. So as we see that happening more and more often, we're still very much in our infancy in what that looks like beyond that. But even as we look at things like aligning to the ARC and creating spaces where in an English 9 class, the questions that I ask with passages align with an SEL competency and tying those two together so that we're asking really intentional questioning.
Sorry. So the other question I had posed too was like what kind of, I mean, the only reason I asked the budget question is because I came from Grisham and we were one of the first 2 campuses so we had to fundraise to do the training because there wasn't, it wasn't widespread throughout the district. We were a pilot. So what resources do we have for campuses that want to implement restorative practices and other techniques?
So a couple things, and thank you for asking those questions. I had forgotten to address them. When we contract that training out, it's averaging about $3,000 a training itself. I have a set of district funds set aside specifically for campuses. If a campus says, yep, I want to make this happen, we talk through. Usually I would like to see some kind of, that's why I ask teachers or principals to send that campus team in the spring so that they're getting that investment already. So we're not just spending money to not see the return on the back end. If we're going to spend the money, it's really going to pay off and it's going to be there. But if I'm doing the training or someone else in-house is doing the training, it's done completely for free.
Ms. Weir.
Thanks. That was a great presentation. You mentioned earlier on the first slide when you're talking about staff, social and emotional learning, you briefly mentioned equity, and kind of later you were talking about not the small classroom things, and I was just wondering how, if you're working with the equity task force, how you're kind of integrating that, because culturally what may be inappropriate for one group may not be for another, and how are you doing that?
So yes, I'm a part of the equity task force. It just seems like a natural fit, right? If we're talking about relationships and we're talking about equity, they're very much aligned. When we have conversations with staff, we often can even talk about like the number of negative interactions a student can receive. We know that students of color receive 2 to 3 times more negative interactions throughout the course of a day of their white peers. It's been tracked, it's been there. However, when I am working with a staff, and like right around this time of the year, I will do an activity with them where I say, I want you to bring your class roster with me. I just want you to bring it with you. And I want you to kind of tier your kids. Who are the kids that you've got really, really strong relationships with? Do that in one color, put them in one bucket. Who are those kids that you're like, I know a little bit, but I could tend to know some more, put them in another bucket. And then who are those kids? Either you know a lot about them, but you still don't have a really strong connection, or you haven't been able to find that connection. And that goes in another bucket. And then we really look at those kids individually. And are there consistencies? Are all of the kids in my last column my African American boys? Well, that tells me something. So I provide that as a resource. It will actually be one of the activities that's in the December newsletter. December newsletter is all going to be about reflection and activities. Here's a great opportunity where you can really critically examine what's there. We know that if we're not careful, social emotional learning can feel whitewashed. It can feel like this is the one way to look at the world. And so providing for teachers, even when I'm teaching second step, what might my kids come to the table already having experienced? Or what might their worldview look like that I can say, okay, I need to address this when I'm teaching it. Or I need to ask them what that looks like. The thing that's been really helpful with restorative practices is when I ask the question, like, how are you feeling today? I'm giving kids an opportunity to say, like, these are things that I've experienced, or these are what things have looked like. Our behavior coaches and myself have worked to kind of look at some of those classroom management strategies where what's maybe considered horseplay with one group may be, aggressive action with another, and how do we kind of have those reflective conversations. And usually that's the way that it's phrased, not necessarily as a, like, you need to stop, but like, if one kid does it and it's horseplay and another student does it and it's aggressive action, what's the difference? And so in asking those questions, you get a longer lasting response, as opposed to like, well, Rochelle told me I can't do it, so I'm not going to do it. But if I ask, like, to make that behavior change really happen on the adult end.
Okay. Ms. Feller.
So I have a specific question on slide 11 when you talk about the Intensive Coaching Institute. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how that's accessed? Is it only for kiddos that are on a behavior intervention plan, or only for special education children?
So
children that are receiving special education services, or can just a teacher who's not necessarily in tune? How do you access that?
Absolutely. So the Coaching Institute we're talking about here is our behavior staff designated that a need that they had was they're really great at behavior, but the coaching and the coaching cycles in and of themselves, they felt like they could use a little bit more help with. So through our ESSA funds, we are funding the Jim Knight instructional coach training for them, because they really are instructional coaches. Their just focus is behavior. To access them, what we really look at is, first, has there been some sort of student support team meeting that has happened? There's identified a need. And in that, campuses will reach out to the behavior interventionist, or not the behavior interventionist, the behavior coach, or the principal of the DAEP, and set up an observation. They come out, they do about a 2-hour observation, and they write a report. Good, bad, and suggestions. Not necessarily like, these are all the things you're doing wrong, but like, you say we're greeting kids at the door, but I only saw you greet 2 kids. When I'm in the work, sometimes it's really hard for me to say, oh, I'm doing that with fidelity. But when another person comes in and shows me the data, I can go, I thought I was doing that really, really well, but I can make some impact in a different way. And then the same place, if our students, we're finding that there's really big behaviors that we're not quite sure how to manage, we come together and we problem solve those. So we've got 5 serving our gen ed students, and then our special education team also has 5 serving just our special education students as well. So they're kind of working our students that are receiving special education services.
I just think it's fabulous, because I'm under the philosophy that every behavior serves a function and communicates a message.
It absolutely does.
I think sometimes even our students don't have the cognitive development yet to even understand exactly what that function it's serving. And so helping the teachers understand it, and in turn helping the students understand it, can prevent those behaviors in the future. So I think it's a really fabulous thing that you're doing.
Thank you. Okay, and I'll make a comment. Thank you for the update on this. I know this has been a big issue. Of course, it interacted with the Safety and Security Task Force, all the social emotional learning, try to prevent it. I think what you said at the very beginning of your statement was, it's not like a shot in the arm and then you walk away from it and it's done. It's not like inoculation at the beginning, as a child or whatever. You need booster shots. So, and I'm hoping that teachers, principals know when to call in, and maybe some need it more than others, and hope they recognize that, and they're encouraged by all means to ask for that help.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Flores, you have any comments on that?
No, I just want to thank Ms. Fink for a wonderful presentation. I also think that it also coincides with the board's focus. I think the fact that the board has said this is a student outcome goal that we need to really focus on has really assisted us district-wide to make sure that we address not only the issues of inequity or racial and educational equity. We talk about these things, but it's continuous and it's part of everything we do. So as we come back in April and come back with the updates, we feel that, again, Rochelle, thank you so much for all the things that you've done, but also with Laura Seegers, and I think that was an excellent tie-in from Trustee Weir where, the equity, where does equity fit in on that? So with that, we will continue to do that and have those discussions. But I want to just implore every campus, we have 55 campuses, I want to make sure that our discussions, it wasn't optional when we talked about it at World Class Summit. We didn't say we were going to optionally have discussions, open dialogue on our campuses about race and educational equity. That's happening. It's November today, so in April, I want to make sure that we have 100% that we have, in fact, addressed that. We're going to continue to address it, and we address it at a readiness rate that each campus is prepared to move that needle, because talk is just talk, but the actions will lead to even further in those numbers, because noted that's 1/3 today. So with that being said, I commend all the efforts of our campuses and the staff that's making it happen, so thank you.
With that, we'll go to agenda item G, discussion items, G1, first reading of local policy. Everybody okay on break or anything? Could we keep going a little bit longer, then we'll take a break maybe after this segment? Okay. So first reading local policy BE and BED local. Assuming you want to do one at a time, but you can do them.
Yes, sir. Good evening, President Chadwell, trustees, Superintendent Flores. We are here tonight to discuss the policies and policy changes and updates. I think I'm in a bad position because I get to follow social and emotional learning and all the wonderful things that they're doing. So I need to start off on a positive note, and I will share with you all the fact that we have over 500 pages of policy to talk about tonight. And I know that you will find just exciting. It's exciting. Okay, how about we start with, hopefully after tonight we won't see each other a whole lot more, so I want to take this opportunity to say happy Thanksgiving to each one of you and to all the people in the audience. Thank you all for being a part of the district. So, to talk about policies, I want to first remind us of why we're here and talking about policies and how this process works. So we review policies several times a year. We're reviewing policies throughout the year. TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards, will give us big policy updates, the big books that you all have seen in the packet of materials that we're talking about tonight. And they give us those updates several times. Like right after the legislative session, the one that just ended, they put together a huge packet of policies to address any of the legal changes that have come out of the state legislature. That packet is on our desks and waiting to be reviewed and approved. We have a couple of cleanup policies from the last legislative session, and right before the legislative session ends, they go through a process of reviewing the previous policies, cleaning up the items, making sure that all the state board rules are included in the policies, etc. So we have to adopt those previous updates before we can get ready to adopt the updates related to the legislative changes. So when we get that packet of information, you get legal policies and local policies for the board and the administration to review. The legal, we call them legal policies, but they are reduced in policy sections in the policy manual, but they are a statement of the law. So the board doesn't have to adopt those. They are the law. They take effect as soon as based on the time of the effective date based on the legislative change. In addition to that, then, once the legal standard has been set, then the district, the board, and the administration has to work together to review the local policies to make sure that our local policies are in line with the legal changes. And that's what we're here. We're going to review tonight, some policies to address those. Now, when we are reviewing those policies, we do them in two ways. We look at the big update, and we're going to get to that in just a couple of minutes, and then we also look individually at policies as they need to be addressed. As you all know, the PIB committee, or the Policy, Innovation, and Budget Committee, we call it affectionately the PIB committee. It's a lot more exciting than the I don't know what the other one is. But we have an opportunity to dig deeply into these policies and try to address them and make sure that we're looking at the needs of the district. That said, I'm going to jump right into the policies for your review. The PIB committee has already reviewed a lot of these, has reviewed all of these policies, and we're bringing them forward for the board's consideration as a part of the discussion, and then we'll bring them back for board adoption at the next board meeting. The first policy that we've looked at and brought for your consideration tonight is policy BE. It is the policy that relates to board meetings. Now, I want to put a pin note here and say that we are looking at these policies based on some discussions we've already been having for the past year, as you may recall. Some of these policies are certainly going to be affected, as you know, in the legislative session. So Update 114 will have some additional changes even to some of these policies. So what we're bringing forth now are the things based on the discussions that we've had over the summer and over the past year, based on the discussions that the board has had in the PIB committee. Okay? So the first one is policy BE relating to board meetings, and this has already been brought to the board for some consideration. So I just want to point out a couple of specific revisions that we made based after those discussions, and make sure that this complies with what the board has in mind, so then we can bring these back. When we bring these back to the board at a future time, hopefully we'll be able to bring them back on the consent agenda, and you won't have the need to go through them with as much detail as we will tonight. This first change, if you can see it, one of the issues, we made some changes to how the board agenda is going to be put together. And the agreement between that the board has requested and that has been discussed with the administration is that the board agenda will be put together earlier, ready for posting, and that the board will get access to information, the synopsis and the documentation related to those action items at an earlier timeline so that the board members can have more time to review them. So the policy outlines the agreements for the dates. What we added in the most recent change starts right here, and that is that the board members are supposed to ask questions of the superintendent or the superintendent's cabinet prior to the board meeting, and they're supposed to ask those questions within 3 days. If the change we've had it here is if the superintendent is not going to be able to get the items, the superintendent or designee is not going to be able to get the items posted and get the information accessed on the board agenda in accordance with the timeline, that item will not be eligible for the consent agenda. I'm sorry, I got my cursor in the wrong place. It will not be eligible for the consent agenda, and it's not subject to the timeline. That was one of the requirements that we wanted to have added, and so we've done so. That was the big one. Are there any other questions about that change in policy BE? Yes, ma'am.
Can I, and this may be to the committee, but so 10 days beforehand is a Monday. And so then you're saying we have to ask a question then by Wednesday? Is that 7 days? 1, 2, 3. Or Thursday?
So you're to submit your questions in that time frame in order to give the administration an opportunity to try to respond to those questions
Right.
prior to.
I guess I'm just, okay, this is just my own personal schedule. And and just knowing, so I'm just kind of, so Monday is when you're saying the agenda would come out with all the documentation, and then Thursday would be the day we would need to submit questions by?
Yes, and that's just for action items. That's what we're talking about here. It's just those items that we're going to be voting on. That way there's time for back and forth, any clarifying questions that staff may have for the questions that we ask. And that's also just for items that we're hoping to get on consent. If it's something that, I believe it even says in here that if the board president feels like an item is of significant community interest, they can say no.
It won't go on consent. It says it right here.
Yeah, that way there's still some leniency. Hey, this.
Right.
It's not just going on consent just because it's an action item.
Because I noticed it still said, well, we're skipping down now, but after that, an individual member can remove only if they've submitted a question. But, last time when this was up, my concern was if
If we didn't get it timely, then
Right,
you didn't have
right.
time.
Then how-
So that was the issue that we were trying to address. If the item wasn't posted timely on the agenda and you all didn't get the information timely, then it would be kind of tying your hands to say you had to submit a question. So the idea here was that these items, as a part of your Lone Star governance motto, that these items would be able to go on the consent agenda so that they could be processed sooner. If you had questions about them, you will have sent them, you will have gotten answers to those questions, and then it can go on consent agenda. If you want to make some comments about them, you can. But what the clarification here was to clarify that if we don't get it timely posted, then that item right here, this item may not be placed on the consent agenda. And so that way it's separated for an opportunity for a full discussion as may be needed at the board meeting. We also clarified that down here, which is the part that Trustee Moses was referring to, that all the items shall be placed on the consent agenda unless state law requires it to be voted on separately or as otherwise provided in paragraph 4 above. The president may also place an individual item for action if they believe that it is of significant community interest. And of course, when an item is on the consent agenda, an individual trustee can pull that item to be voted on separately at the board meeting.
Yeah, and I guess it says an individual, that was my other question. So it says only if they've submitted a question, but 2 trustees at any time, right?
Right, yeah, I get the point there was just for someone, again, going back to just trying good governance, so someone doesn't show up the night of the board meeting, hasn't submitted a question or even reached out about something and says, oh, no, I want to pull that item. It's like, well, that would have been nice to know there was an issue before we got to the board meeting. That's to try and encourage that communication between the board and administration.
So you had your light on? Was that?
Oh, that was to help just answer
Okay.
questions, yeah.
So
you can turn me off.
I have some concerns about this, all this underlined area, and even before. The idea of 14 days, I like the idea of having material prepared as soon as possible, but I know that there's a lot of times when the administration is putting together material and you're getting the final information, and I know that we've asked for, and I think it's gotten better. I don't know if it's every time, but you put a date and time stamp on the bottom of a presentation that says this is as of Friday at 5 o'clock or 4:30 or Monday or even the day before a meeting. I still would like to have that as an option. In the way I'm reading it right now is the deadline for submitting items for inclusion. That means to put it on the agenda, is that right? But does that mean the material has to be solid by then?
Which paragraph are you looking at?
The third paragraph up there.
That's just for an item to be requested to be put on the agenda.
Okay. And again, this kind of goes back to sometimes we get the material usually on a Friday afternoon, read it over the weekend, scan through it. The public has a chance to look at it. Then I start looking at it. I just don't like the word shall. You know, if you don't ask a question in writing a certain amount, I think I like the flexibility we have right now. There have been times when, we kind of back and forth. There's emails and I see them. I just don't like to have a limitation on that. The board shall submit any questions related to action items in writing they'd like to address 7 days in advance. To me, that's very restrictive. I'd say request the board members. It's requested the board members, but I just don't want anybody to say, well, you missed it. You only gave me 5 days, so I don't have to answer it, especially when there's a discussion. The other thing is go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, then the other one is items can be pulled from the consent agenda. We can always, legally, we can still pull those from consent. We can discuss them in public. So just because they're on consent, it's more to expedite the meetings. But it's if for some reason we have a question that's come up a day before, we can still pull it from the consent and talk about it. So just don't want to waive that right by any means. And
right, I don't think that's waived in here, but just that last sentence talks about how an individual member can still remove an item from consent.
Okay.
And I guess I wanted to make sure that we're clear that even if the item is on consent, you're going to get ready to take up the items and vote for all the items, but if you want to make a comment on an item prior to a vote, we're ready to move for consent. Are there any discussions? Then people can make comments about those anyway. Trustees can make comments about those.
Okay. Like I said, I just don't want to waive our opportunity to make requests, make changes. Maybe don't expect always an answer within the day before, but the best the case can. I still want that option that we can, as long as we're not burdening the administration. The other option is we can always table it if necessary. But I hate some of these things you can't table. They have deadlines when you have to vote on them.
Right.
That's
Sorry, guys.
That's right. Ms. Fessa.
thought it might be helpful for people to know what our current process is, because we're talking about this and like, oh, this is what we're proposing to do. But right now, the Friday before the meeting, the agenda is set, and there's a posting, and that there's normally trustees that meet to set the agenda, and then by Monday at noon, if we have any questions, we have to submit them by Monday at noon. I'm the one that submits the most questions. And so I know that I have to get it done over the weekend, or I have to get it done on Monday morning, and I have to get those out by noon. And then they try to have it either incorporated in our presentations, or they get back to me in writing. Try to get back to me in writing because we don't want to make the meetings go on forever, and sometimes I have a lot of questions. So I try to just resolve those. So the idea here is that we back things up a little more so that weekends that, like, I had a really crazy weekend this past weekend. It was very, very hard for me to spend several hours looking at these when I was at soccer tournaments and I had church things going on and, life. And so to have them be business days is really helpful, that we could have 3 business days to actually look at the materials and then submit questions. So as we were going through this whole process, I was thinking about, okay, how could this be in such a way that would facilitate us to have the information in a timely way, ask our questions, and have the district be able to respond. So I just thought that might be helpful for people to understand out there, like what's the current process and what we were thinking in the PIB committee when we were going through it.
Okay. Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Ms. Best. I think that was a really good synopsis of what we were trying to accomplish, because really, even the whole time I've been on board, there's always been people who say, man, it'd be great to have this material a little bit earlier. And so I know that's been something we've been trying to accomplish. And again, I go back to, I understand the idea behind, like we hope that you'll do this or we request that you do this, but I think it is important to have some type of a timeline in there, and if it needs to be less than 7 days, I'm open to that conversation. But I think it's important to give staff time to answer our questions where they don't feel rushed, or that then again, hey, they're answering our questions, but we're getting them right as we sit down at the dais or getting them the day up, or there's some time, okay, they answered the question, sure. Are there any follow-ups to this, or is this good? So I think that's the idea, to try and set just a good timeline in place where we have the responsibility to review the materials and get our questions in, and they have the responsibility to review them, answer the questions, and get us responses.
Okay, and I'm all in favor of getting the information sooner than later. I do know there's been times, though, when they've been real clear, adamant, saying we don't have it, we're working on it. And my view has always been get it 90% of the way, post it on Friday afternoon. You need to tweak it the following week. It's on the agenda. You can always modify it, and you can modify it up to the day of, and hopefully it's getting close. One thing I don't want to happen is I don't want something to show up here, just have an agenda item that says vote on such and such. We've never seen it, and we get to the dais, and I'm reading through it, trying to understand it. That's happened several times, and that is dangerous.
I fully agree, and I think that's why we have it in here where if that does happen, those items can't go on consent, or that's now a separate item.
Consent or action or discussion. Yeah. Just when somebody hands something to me, I'll show up and it's here, and then said, yeah, vote on that, and I don't like that. So, well,
this should ensure that if that does happen, then it's a separate item where we can go, well, we don't want to vote on that because we just got it.
And we always have that right to always, I don't remember the Roberts rules, but they said they didn't like the word table something. So I remember I went to the training and they said forgot the word, but said, yeah, table is not the exact word, but that's what I've always called it, table it. So.
And also, to be clear, it can't just show up tonight at the board meeting for action. It would have at least had to have gone on the agenda and have been posted.
I know that, but sometimes there's been something, just a very vague statement, or it says for action, it just says vote on such and such, whatever topic, and we don't have any details for it until we show up. And that's happened several times. And
You're saying on the agenda it doesn't have any details?
That's right. Yeah.
You help set the agenda, so.
Well, this hasn't happened this year, but it's happened in the past. So I don't think it's happened this year. So
I want to be clear. Am I to change the word shall in this sentence, or are we leaving that and you all are going to kind of work around it and reconsider it at some point in the future? What am I bringing back?
The reason I don't like the word shall is it limitates, it's, as long as we don't waive our right to make a request up to the last minute, again, keeping in mind, being respectful, that the data may not be there, but I just don't want it to say, oh, you turned it in 6 days in advance when the rule says 7. That's my reluctance for that shall. Anyway, you guys are having a conversation. Go ahead.
I think you still can. It's just that at that point, you're not really necessarily waiving your right to pull it from consent, but you're also saying, well, then you're opening yourself up to saying, hey, I just opened this yesterday, and I got in my question late, and so I'm going to pull it. And it's versus getting ahead of it. And I know we're all on busy schedules, so I'm guilty. Sometimes I have opened it with the Wednesday before the meeting and get caught up, but that's what happens.
I've heard stories that people used to be the packet when it was printed out would open it on the dice.
I've seen that.
So again, this board is very conscientious, reads in a lot of details. So as I said, as long as we're not abusing the system, and these are local policies, which means we can waive them if we have to, we can change them. But it's not consent. I don't just want to make sure you're not confusing my word with consent or discussion and action.
Right. This is just for the consent agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just the consent.
Yeah. Not for discussion. Yeah. Because clearly, like tonight, I'm sure they will run that data pretty up to the minute.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that is as accurate as possible. Yeah. That's just for discussion items are different.
Okay.
Okay. So it's my understanding I will bring BE back for consent.
Can it has nothing to do with this section. Actually, later on when you have order of business, yeah, you guys, and I really, I like the way that it's laid out. The only thing I was going to point out is that in BED, which we're going to get to in a minute, we've added public comment shall occur at the beginning of the meeting, and so that's a little bit in conflict with what we actually have in our order, where we have public comment.
Yes,
I will tell you places, and I know that it's like not on the agenda and then the different agenda items, but I didn't know if it.
Well, that is one. That's why I was setting the stage for the fact that we're doing some cleanup. The BED that we're bringing for you tonight for your review, we've pulled out of the update 114, which is a part of some of the changes that came, as you know, the September 1st change that required public participation and the individual way that it's happening, and so it's going to have to be cleaned up. These two are going to have to kind of be reworked to be discussed. I mean, to be read in congruent so that they run simultaneously and they are the same. But I do know we're in the process. I know you have revised your script, and at this point, the discussion that we had with Board Counsel was that we would just kind of continue to work with the BED as recommended by TASB for tonight's discussion, and I guess we'll be continuing to discuss it with the PIB to make sure that we tie up those loose ends when we're finishing up update 114.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that they weren't not quite
incongruent,
aligned.
yes.
Yeah. Just I was going to thank you, Trustee Whit, for pointing that out. I mean, I think it is. Yeah, we want to make sure that whatever we decide in the next policy is reflected accurately here. So thank you.
I will say that the order of business, I do like how you've broken out now that the different types of participation, because I know right now if you come in and sign up and then we hold you and this makes it a little clearer that where we're going to have people actually speak.
So I've got two questions. Are you ready
Back
to go
on
to
this
the,
one? I'm sorry.
go
Back
to
on
the
this one?
next line or next page?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
3. Okay. So on page 3,
Yes.
The order of business, recognitions, introductions. I know that we still are working on that. Is that right? I know that there's some plan to have that for each feeder pattern, and I have not heard an update on that, so that's a request that I have. Dr. Flores, if you can put that in the board update, what we're talking about, every feeder pattern would have its court at the end of the semester, so at least once a semester, maybe twice.
At that recognition.
You have it on here. We can leave it on here, but right now we're not doing recognitions, so those are on hiatus until this new plan is put together. And then the other one is these documents right here. Our request is a policy change that we post this raw document online, and have people come and be able to print this out, type it up online. They can print it out and bring it, and of course it still has to be there before we start the meeting, but this would be real simple. This says forms to be filled out, citizen participation form, agenda topic, and I just think it would be easier for the community. And I would like for us to say, until we gavel in, you're welcome to bring a document sign up. Right now, we save at 7 o'clock. It opens 1 hour before, is that right? I think it's the comment section, you can come in, is that right, Ms.? 1 hour before, and then at 7 o'clock, when the meeting is supposed to start, it's a cutoff. And I think with the traffic, with people coming to try to get here, I know that in the past, there have been problems, so that's a request I have, is that until we gavel in, that people can turn in a comment card. So.
I had actually highlighted, it's part of BED, so he's jumping ahead. But I had actually highlighted that too. But it says our board's procedures, which is different from our policy, which I think that means we can change that at any time without it being a policy change,
Yes.
right?
Are you in BED now? So I'm just.
I jumped to BED because that's actually where I had it highlighted, what he's talking about, the way people sign up, the procedures for signing up to participate.
Okay, so my understanding and my takeaway from this is that the PIB committee is going to consider this recognitions and introductions section as a part of a change, or are we ready to say that we want to do this and bring it back when we bring this next policy back?
I'd say leave it in there as it is. My comment was more, what are the plans? So I'd say leave it in there because we can always have it if we need it.
As a part of our cleanup, okay. So is there anything else then on that section, or are we ready to go to the next policy?
I just want to make sure that everybody understands that Patty's voice is going to be more important than ever because this is 10 calendar days. So staff, all items and accompanying items will be much earlier. So we need to make sure that when Patty sends those emails out, that we're way ahead of that game. So this is a change, which
Okay.
I applaud.
And understand about putting this on a form online where right now under the board meetings, it talks about how to speak at the board. You know what I'm talking about? If you go to the website under board.
Hang on, I think we're going to get to that in the next policy. Let's just, I think we hear you, but let's just get to the next one.
All right.
Yeah.
So is it, when we post the agenda, is that still going to be on Friday before a Thursday meeting, or will that be earlier?
I thought it was just said in here it was 14 days ahead. Is that right?
But that says to the board, not necessarily publicly. It says that the agenda will be presented to the board.
It's always been when the board gets it, the public gets it. And that's my preference.
Okay.
Whenever we get it, the public sees it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's something we will probably want to add to our consideration for the PIB, where we're going to put that in the policy so that that's a clear item.
Okay, I don't mean to, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in one more time. The only thing that I was going to say is the other note that I had was adoption of minutes, you guys, is number 3, but we've moved that now to the consent agenda with Lone Star Governance. Dr. Howard, I think this time, actually, this meeting, we're moving the minutes, so it doesn't actually need to be a separate section.
That's just a friendly cleanup. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Okay, then we will move on to policy BED, which I want to point out to you that we have jerked this, just kind of yanked the version that you have straight from Update 114, which it includes a lot of the changes, the TASB recommended changes following the legislative session, but we have not yet started the process for Update 114. So we're pulling this one out so that we could address it because of the citizen participation portion, and to make sure that the policy that you all are considering and get adopted as soon as possible is following in compliance with the law and in compliance with the request that the board has. So the recommendation, what you have in front of you, is the recommendation of the policy straight from TASB, and we are looking for any additional comments that the board might have, if you have any at this time, and understand again that this one is one of the cleanup policies that we will need to do some tweaking on at BE as we're continuing this process.
And Chad, this is the one, if you look under procedures, because I had highlighted that same section, that first sentence, shall sign up with the presiding officer as specified in the board's procedures, which our procedures are different than our policy. So I don't know that we need to even change our policy to address how people sign up to speak. That's something it looks like that we can just do at any time as a board decide.
I agree with that. The policy says it's according to procedures. So the procedures obviously are how you do it on a more day-to-day basis, which is easier to change than this process for changing a policy.
Yeah,
so if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's because I know like when we did that, even that open meetings training up in Dallas, I mean, he's even suggested just having it completely online to sign up as a way to make it quicker and to know.
Who did that? Who did that? What were you saying?
It was David Hansen's law firm that did
They talked about it though.
Do you remember who was at Tassatasca?
But you were saying it was one of the.
It was one of the
sessions.
presenters,
Okay.
who had that suggestion. So
To do everything online?
for signing up,
Okay.
yeah.
And
And so, I mean, I think that's something that we should probably talk about, but I don't know that it's anything that we should put into policy, because it's more flexible if we just do it on our own. My only thing for the policy was to make sure it matched the other one.
I do have another, can I make another suggestion
For
here?
BED?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so go to complaints and concerns. Next page. Okay, so the very first line, it says, "The presiding officer or designee shall determine whether an individual person," I'm looking at this scratch through it, "an individual addressing the board has attempted to solve a matter administratively through resolution channels established by policy. If not, the individual shall be referred to the appropriate policy to seek resolution, employee, student, or whatever." So this implies that as the presiding officer, the board will determine whether or not that person who wants to stand up and has made a statement wants to complain, address us about something. Are you implying that the board officer is supposed to determine, have you followed the procedure? Or right now, the way this is written, this blue statement that I read, it says we request that you follow the.
So that blue statement is for the public comment section, and this is for those who are making complaints, raising complaints or concerns. And so it is the process by which, if you're receiving something that is determined to be a complaint or a concern that needs to be addressed administratively, that should have gone through the process before it gets to the board, then you're to make that determination. You're allowed to make that determination. You're required to, according to shall.
I know, it just seems like that's very subjective for one person.
Well, I guess my guess is, I mean, it is relatively subjective, but the other part of it is it's kind of subjective, but it's kind of clear. If a person is complaining about something or someone and some action that they did not take or they needed to take
But that,
against
again,
an
that
individual.
doesn't preclude them from their free speech, which means they could stand up and.
So that's, yeah, it's a complicated issue which can be decided on a case-by-case basis. I will tell you, I'm aware that some boards, it is a process, right? You can decide how you want to handle that in addressing the free speech issues, because you have to balance the rights of the speaker for free speech and the rights of the individual to be for basically the evaluation or the complaint. Because the process, if there is a complaint, there's a process for determining who gets to decide whether it's an open or closed. So you can let the person speak, but you may want to close down the meeting, for example, and allow that person to engage in his or her First Amendment speech, but we're only going to do it, we're going to receive this in closed session, not in an open session kind of meeting. So there are a number of different ways to consider how to address that, and it is my understanding that you all are consider looking at that as a part of how you're going to address that script. Is that not correct?
We are.
I think that's a conversation that the board
is.
council should be having on the mic, not you.
That was my
With the
understanding.
new law as of September 1st, there's new rules about who can say what about whom.
So this policy has been in place for quite a while. This is standard language in TASB-issued policies, and I think the aim of it is not to subvert anyone's First Amendment rights. It's simply you have established a number of processes internally to allow folks who have complaints that they wish to have somehow addressed by the district to be channeled under those three policies, DGBA, FNG, GF. I think that the aim of that is to encourage you as the board president to, where possible, sort of direct folks accordingly. but it is not to supplant the First Amendment right. Ideally, folks would use a process if they have a complaint they wish to address to follow a complaint process.
The question I have is the board presiding officers shall determine whether they've done that or not. And again, it's more of an encouragement,
Right.
and they may not know the process.
Right.
So do they still have a chance to speak? Okay, thank you. Ms. Feller.
Well, I agree with President Chadwell on this one, that it does put a lot of responsibility back on the presiding officer with their having to determine if this person has attempted to solve this matter in other means. And I think that that's a lot of responsibility to put back on you when you get or whoever sits in that position to get these brown pieces of paper and then to read it and then have to go find that person and say, have you, or to interrupt their speech while they're speaking and say, wait a second, this is a complaint. Have you processed this? And here's nowhere in the policy does it says they can't speak even if they're voicing a complaint. So I don't have necessarily a problem with the First Amendment right on this because we're not telling them that they can't. But it is putting a lot of responsibility back on the presiding officer or designee to, at what point do they determine, have they attempted to resolve this? And it says while they're speaking to the board. So at what point do you?
Right.
So I agree that that's pretty ambiguous in the language on that paragraph.
Is there any way we could change it so that part of our board procedure, and this would be not for here because it's too much of a discussion, but I guess as we were just talking, if we do it online and people can fill it out ahead of time, we can just ask, and you check off.
Not everyone has internet access to fill it out online.
Right, and but they can come here and do it too. But either way, on the form, we could just ask, have you, if you have a complaint, have you looked at these three things, and set,
I kind of see this actually a little differently. So a lot of times when people send us emails or they get up and give us public testimony, they think they're filing a complaint. They think that that's the process to file a complaint, that they come and they give their 3-minute spiel, and then they're like, okay, what'd you do about it? And we're like, well, you just sent us an email or gave public testimony. You didn't file a complaint. And they're like, but I thought I did. And so by saying that the presiding officer needs to follow up with that person and go, hey, did you file a complaint about this? Because otherwise they could be under the misinterpretation that they just filed a complaint by giving public testimony or by sending us an email. And that's not the case. And we have seen this recently, that people literally, they'll send us emails and I'll respond back and go, there's a process. And talk to them a little bit about that, and they're like, oh, I thought just sending the email was filing the complaint. I'm like, no.
So I think you're right. I think you're actually going down the exact path, and that is if the person is seeking a resolution, which is kind of what it references here, if they're actually asking for a resolution, if they do it as a part of public comment, the board can't grant resolution because it's not an item on the agenda. It's not an action item. So that's how you refer them on where they go. And I will tell you, you all have been around a while. You remember that board counsel a lot of times will step in and can, based on the discussion you have, to say that you want to remind the speaker to be cognizant that although you have a First Amendment right, that First Amendment right, as you legal scholars know, is not absolute. And so there are some things you can say and some things you can say, but if you say them, you have to deal with the consequences of that. And so in order to guide that conversation, board counsel can step in and help the board. And it's happened before, as you probably remember, where the board counsel will approach the microphone and kind of encourage the person. So it's not, generally in the regular meeting, it's not something that you have to decide
I
for
recognize
yourself.
it, too, if there's a pending grievance, that we have to remain impartial and stay away from information ahead of time. So, agree that. Mr. Moses or Ms. Vest, I think, was Mr. Moses. Both of you.
Well, Mr. President, if it's appropriate, could our LSG coach, Dr. Howard, come down to see if he has any recommendations based on Lone Star governance and some best practices?
Well, yeah, I think
if it's appropriate.
Yeah, sure. By all means. give us a brief, Dr. Howard, if you give us a brief review of all of the thousands of districts you've seen across the state. Best practice, please.
So now I can tell you exactly how to do everything, just like I want you to do it, right? I commend you with, first of all, the timeline that you've set for receiving information, asking questions, being able to give that information back. I think, just like everything else that you've done through this process, you bite it all off at the beginning, and you're ambitious in what you do. So I commend you on that. If you want my honest recommendation, and this is just my opinion, so you do what you feel like you need to do. You have a lot of flexibility. I would limit in regular board meetings. I would limit the participation of public comments to only those on items on the agenda, and do that at the very beginning of the meeting. I know that there's the comments and discussion that you need to have of, does that limit public speaking and limit people to talk? But I think there's other channels to address those issues. If community members have an issue that's not on the agenda, they take that up with the administration first and discuss and go through those channels. But you take public testimony or public comments on items that are only on the agenda. But again, that's your decision as a board. You asked my recommendation, so I'll tell you what I think. And do that I would suggest doing that at the very beginning of the meeting, so that way all the public testimony is heard before the board starts taking any discussion items and discussing any items. And unless I'm wrong, the way I interpret the new law is that public testimony or public comments have to be given before the board has discussion on any item. So just be very cautious on that.
I think it has to be done before or during. You just can't take public comment after you've taken action. I understand that right. So
that's correct. Okay.
Just a slight
clarification.
Yes.
Yeah. So you
mean before, at the beginning of the meeting, or before the item is taken up, not during the discussion?
So what the law says is you have to consider public comments before or during the deliberation or consideration of an item. So that's why I don't think you're prohibited from discussing an item. You just can't take action or move on to the next item without first having heard from folks on that item.
Right.
And my recommendation on that is you refer to your board counsel on that. Besides those are the comments that I would have on this. I think if you look at the complaints and concerns, Member Vesta, I kind of lean towards your viewpoint on this, in the fact of this is an opportunity to, if an individual comes and they think, here's my opportunity to file a complaint, no, this is not the setting. Here's the way you file that grievance or complaint process.
We could fix that easily with this document. Kind of put this same statement at the bottom of and I think there's a version of this. Put this online. Put this there as well. And again, this isn't. We still have the paper copies here. So for those who don't have computers, they can still come and fill it out by all means. But to say, here's the process. If you want to file a complaint, click this link. If you want to file a grievance, click this link. If you want to file or FAQ of some sort, so people are aware that they don't think, hey, I filed a complaint by sending an email, and therefore they've done that.
And I also commend you on your comments on the fact of giving people the opportunity up until the meeting starts to sign up for public comments. I think that's more or less just a common courtesy. I mean, traffic is bad, especially around Austin area. So I was late getting here too. So, you have an opportunity to sign up right till when the meeting starts. I think that's just
back in open session.
I think that is a fair gesture to the community.
Okay, thank you. And I do have one more question. I think Mr. Math suggested or had a question, or somebody did, about how much can we interact with somebody if they stand up and they talk about dyslexia or environmental issues?
I was watching the Williamson County Court, and they asked a question of the person that presented, and I was wondering if that's something we should consider.
Those are things that are on the agenda, or they're just...
Any public comment?
So the Open Meetings Act requires you to not comment or enter into discussions that are not on the agenda. If it's on the agenda, though, you are free to engage in a back and forth discussion. You can on items that are not on the agenda. If someone were to come forward and say, "I have this issue," or this question, you're allowed to answer factual questions or give information. Clarifications, those kinds of things, but not to engage in a back and forth discussion or a deliberation of the matter unless it's been posted on the agenda.
Thank you. Okay.
It says that right here. You can see that specific factual information or recitation of existing policy may be furnished in response to inquiries, but the board shall not deliberate or decide regarding any subject that is not included on the agenda posted with notice of the meeting.
Okay. Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, so hearing the conversation around the complaints and concerns about engaging with somebody, whether or not, now it's deciding whether or not their comments are on the agenda or not on the agenda, do we need to give some consideration to Dr. Howard's recommendation about limiting this to items on the agenda? I mean, people still they can send us emails, they can work with staff, we can have links. I agree, having the sign-up sheet online is important, and having the links there to other ways for them to communicate with administration about issues. Do we want to have that conversation about limiting just items on the agenda?
I'm personally not ready to do that yet, but I think because just what we've heard from the community here tonight, they're coming on a regular basis, and I want them to be able to, for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10. I think it's a good investment of time, So I like it the way it is. Right now we're talking about changing it. There's no group, one or more group, 5-minute group. It's everybody gets 1 3-minute, and we can change that if I understand it right. If necessary, if we had 100 people sign up, we can reduce it down to no less than 1 minute. I think I saw that. I don't remember what line, but just.
That is correct, and it
Going
says
back-
that right.
Just going back and forth between BE and BED local.
No, this is BED. It
Okay.
says it in BED on page 1 of 3, where it discusses the fact that, let me see exactly where it is. The meeting management, where it says that the presiding officer, maybe right here.
Yeah, overall time limit for public comment and adjusting the time allotment to each speaker. Correct. However, no individual shall be given less than 1 minute to make comments. Well, one thing that I wanted to clarify is okay, why are we eliminating the 5-minute? It's because by law, we can't say to a group, you have to have one, the way they changed the law, every person is afforded the right to speak. So it was actually just, the law changed and we can't have it anymore. So if you want more time, you could, we were talking about that, you could just say, okay, all of our group is we have, maybe you have a 10-minute speech. Well, now you have 4 people who get up and, you just continue with the script. And that's, but I just really wanted to explain why that was changing. It's because the law changed and we couldn't do it that way anymore. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I can, real quick, I'll address Steve's question on this. My recommendation is, if you need to make a clarifying statement or you misheard something from a speaker and you want to clarify that, I think that's appropriate. Make sure you hear exactly what they're saying. But this forum is not the place to start thinking as a two-way communication system with the community. That needs to be handled in other forums outside the board meeting. If a community member comes up, speaks, gives comments on a discussion item, for example, we comment, we talk about that. If that changes the discussion between board members, that's perfectly fine. You discuss, you make the decision. But to have a back and forth with community members, this isn't the forum designed for that. You want to have a forum where you can actually have good two-way communication with community members on big decisions. So, my recommendation is you do not do that. You listen to public comments. If it changes the discussion between yourselves, that's fine. But then you work to have other opportunities for those two-way conversations with communities outside of the board meeting.
And that's a part of when we went through our board evaluation and the scoring, that we need to incorporate more of those opportunities to have two-way communication with the community, and then that's a part of the whole Lone Star governance process as we work to implement that. And that's just, it's a tool. The what we went through last time, it's a tool that's provided to us to help us to have better governance. But it's definitely like not like a rating. I mean, like, oh, it's not like, well, if we got, it's not a determination of whether our board is good or bad. It's a determination of whether we're following what you guys recommend. And one of those things is you recommend that we don't have, that we limit public communication to things on the agenda. We feel differently about that. So, or some of us. Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak for the board in that way. Some of us might feel differently about that. That's okay.
Yeah, and
It's a tool.
That the recommendation for only comments on the agenda, that's not in the Lone Star governance recommendation. That's a Dr. Drew Howard recommendation, since you asked my thoughts. But yeah, the Lone Star Governance Board of Self-Evaluation Instrument is a continual improvement document of what his research says is best practices for boards to improve student outcomes. So how do you continually improve the actions of this governance body to impact growing students? So it's an ongoing, continual process of improvement.
Okay.
If someone should address the sort of the issue that can come up with that kind of dialogue, that it's when it's acceptable and it's okay and everything's kind of going along smoothly, it kind of works well. But if you engage in that, you have to allow it. That's where you can get into a First Amendment issue, when you're deciding that certain people you will engage with certain people, but you won't engage with other people in terms of the dialogue. And so those are the kinds of things that history tells us you want to just be aware of and be careful.
And I agree with that. I think it has to be very careful. So, okay. So we have a couple more policies. I don't know how long these 112 and 113. Are you done with this?
I'm done with this. If there are no other questions on BED.
BED. Okay.
BED. We're going to bring
We've been
it
going
back.
for a couple hours, and if we're going to take a break because we've got a couple things. How long will 12 and 13, 112 and 113 take?
One of them has 382 pages. I don't have that much to do. I think I can probably do it in 5 or 10 minutes, depending on questions. I really can.
And then I'd like to take a break, certainly before we get to 5, because that may be an extensive discussion. Is that all right, everybody? Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to let's go ahead then and start with what we have as G. What we've presented for you on the board agenda. You see, we've presented update 112 and other local policies, and update 113. We were working on 112 already when 113 came out, so we put the other local policies with those that are a part of 112. This is when the administration looks at the policies as when they're coming out. When we have a local update, they also might look at other policies and things that are going on in the district and see where we might need to make changes. This one of those is policy CPC local regarding office records management, and it is a real minor change, but we wanted to make sure that it's clear because legally we need to identify right here the records management officer, that it will be the superintendent or designee that shall serve as the records manager, and that is the only change that we're recommending in policy CPC, so that we're in compliance with the law, and we're just taking out the fact that there are other corresponding procedures because we use the state's record management process. The next one is policy EIE, which came from teaching and learning as a part of their curriculum changes regarding retention and promotion. And I know that there were some questions submitted related to this and why these changes at the bottom here regarding kindergarten promotion, why they were changed. I think the answers might have already been given, but do we need to clarify any of that on the record? Okay, so this is a change just to make sure that we're in compliance. That is a part of that policy at EIE. And these will be brought back on the consent agenda for second reading and approval at the next board meeting. The next policy that is a part of the local review is policy EH. regarding curriculum, and the change there is it's page 2 of 7 on the policies as they exist, as they're printed. And there we've made a couple of changes here again from teaching and learning, which is to just identify. There was some discussion earlier about how we design curriculum, and that we that teachers are to implement curriculum. It used to be with fidelity and the scope and sequence, but the district and the Round Rock's procedure is to allow the individual independent decisions regarding how they're going to implement the instruction, but to make sure that as they're implementing it, the campuses have flexibility regarding sequence to meet the needs of their students, but they can use that flexibility, but they may not exclude any of the Texas, the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So that is the change on that page. And then if you go down to page 3 of 7, it is a cleanup to talk about, to address how we're going to, how administrators are to work with teachers to make sure that there's consistency between the curriculum, what's being taught, and taking into consideration the students' needs, and again, how we coordinate the curriculum in those areas. Minor changes to address how we actually do address curriculum in Round Rock. And that's it for the other local policies, and these are the ones that we'll bring back. Are there any questions on any of those changes? Okay. So then I will present them. The big ones that we have are Update 112 and Update 113. The board has had an opportunity to review these. The PIB committee has reviewed these policies, and what we've brought forward as a part of the process are the policies as reviewed by PIB for your consideration. This is the background and information when we get the large update from TASB that outlines how we do it. This is a list of all the policies that are addressed in this policy manual. Are there any specific questions that any trustee has about any of these local policies in Update 112? Okay. The same process then is for Update 113, and I can move on. Does anybody have any specific questions regarding Update 113? In that case, I have presented the policies for your consideration. We will bring them back with any of the changes as discussed for consideration for consent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll do the big one, the campus alignment. So it is 9:20. We're going to take a quick 5-10 minutes break, and we'll get back to it. It's 9:30. We'll go ahead and get started. So let's go to agenda item G5, which is where we are, which is campus capacity and boundaries, and we do have some speakers on that. So my recommendation is we let the presentation go first, and we take the comments. Is that all right? No. You want to take the comments? Are you ready to go?
I think we learned last time. Let me say this. I think it's better to always have speakers before staff presentation, because then staff can then present anything that the speakers had said. They can then come back and clarify during their presentation.
I'm fine with that. I know in the past we've sometimes said let the presenters, the staff present, and then some of the answers. But I'm open either way. We're going to take your comments. So if you guys want to speak first, we'll take you first. All right. So with that, Eric Opida, I think, and then after that will be Matt Kepner. So, and this is all on G5, which is the boundaries. Okay.
Mr.
You get
Chairman,
3 minutes, right?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, members, I'm Eric Opiella. I'm a parent at Caraway Elementary School. We have a large group here from Caraway Elementary. Wanted to talk about this item. I realize that we are by no means the only campus that is immensely overcrowded. Our school was built for about 450 students. We have a little shy of 900 students at our campus right now. I served on the Citizens Bond Committee last cycle, and I, having toured these schools, I know that by no means are we in a unique situation in this district. However, I did want to speak to some of the challenges that we face that you might not know about Caraway Elementary. First of all, our gym and our PE classes are split between the gym, the hallways, and the cafeteria. A lot of times they're having to do PE out on the parking lot and you know where you have cars coming and going, things like that. It's just not good for our students. We begin lunch at 10:20 a.m., and we end the last group of students going in at 10:35 p.m. So that's just, I'm sorry, 1:35 p.m. Yeah, that was a great, quick lunch, Insta-lunch.
You said PM.
Yeah.
So 10:30
It's only
PM.
9:30 at night, guys. I know y'all have to go much longer than this, but nevertheless, our concern is that even with the expansion that was approved as part of the bond, that we're going to barely catch up to where we are. We're treading water with where we are. And when we're going to talk about the issue of redistributing some of the students among campuses, we have a campus just across 183, Jollyville Elementary, which is underpopulated. It's one of the things I learned when we were on the bond committee about that. So I know you're going to hear from a lot of other parents that are concerned about it. I want to add my voice to that, and I know y'all have a tough task. It's not something that you relish politically, is moving students around, but in this case, I think it's necessary, especially in this fast-growing part of Austin that the Westwood learning community is in. Keep in mind, they did a groundbreaking yesterday for another 5,000 jobs going in at Apple. That's right in our neighborhood. That's in the Caraway attendance zone where the president was yesterday. So please consider the challenges that we face at Caraway. I know Superintendent Flores and I talked about that with leadership at Round Rock ISD about a month ago. He's been to our campus. He knows. Thank you, and I don't relish the task that you have in front of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Opalaya. Next is Matt Kettner, I think. And after that will be Krista Sheffield.
Hello, members. Also a parent at Caraway, and yeah, there's a lot of overcrowding. Students are in pretty much every room. They're lining the hallways in the mornings. There's just a lot of challenges with expansion on the campus. The campus is very limited. It was designed as a small neighborhood school. Doesn't have a lot of space around it to expand. So in the long run, construction, you think, well, how are we going to accommodate these students? Construction is an option. But construction timelines are long, and the real estate is very limited. So the other solution is reducing attendance to that specific school. So that's through redistricting. If you look at where the district is located, most of it is on the west side of 183. There's a small portion on the east side of 183 that is much closer to other elementaries within Round Rock ISD. So a very simple, small redistricting could probably balance out the loads between the two schools. There's also some other potential issues where within certain areas there's sharing of information like utility bills and leases and things like this to get into the school, right? So these are people that would be normally be districted in Austin ISD that are then sharing information to get into the school. So there's also an issue of kind of over-enrollment due to false application, right? So I don't know exactly how to address that through enforcement or strengthening of the credentials required, but that's something to consider. That's contributing to the overcrowding issue. So I think some other people will talk about some of the pains that the school is experiencing, but I just wanted to come up with some potential solutions to the problem and for your consideration. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Up next will be Krista Sheffield. After that will be Aaron Franz, I think. So, okay.
Hi, I'm better with a little script here, so I'm going to read off this. My name's Krista Sheffield. My son and daughter both attend Caraway. Speaking to you today to explain my considerable concern with our school's overcrowding and ask for you to provide relief. The Caraway community prides ourselves on our diversity and inclusivity. We love our administration and faculty, and our community is highly involved and generous with its time. Over the past 5 years, our area has experienced an unprecedented rate of growth, with projections still climbing. We are at a breaking point. We currently have 5 portables, which is 10 classrooms. We have no stage nor ability for a general assembly. Community events are often canceled due to lack of space. For instance, just this week, our traditional Thanksgiving lunch with families had to be limited to just students. Every classroom is currently being used to its full capacity, and even closets and hallways are serving as classrooms for PE, intervention, and tag. As our smallest grade level 5th grade graduates, a new batch of kindergartners will enroll with projections of at least 7 classes. This means that we will immediately begin next year with a classroom deficit. The only available land to place another portable is on the remainder of our field, further crippling PE and recess. I've written a detailed email that I've sent to each of you addressing our concerns, so I'll just highlight a few more. Student and staff safety is being affected. In regards to PE, our gym is half regulation size to begin with. During inclement weather, PE is having to perform classes in hallways outside of operating classrooms. PE is often conducted in the bus lane due to lack of space. There are often 90-plus students in the half-sized gym. The coach can only be heard via microphone, and the noise is triggering not only to our sensory-sensitive population, but to everyone. The cafeteria is being used as a gym, which is on the opposite side of the school. There are exposed cinder block beams throughout the cafeteria, increasing the safety risk. For recess, we have a small fenced play area with 2 small playscapes that can have 170 children at a time on this playground, because we have 9 first-grade classes. This increases tension, poor social dynamics, and safety concerns. Health concerns are seen in our cafeteria, which is bursting at the seams. Grades must eat as early. Well, we talked about that. The level of noise is overwhelming, and I really mean overwhelming. Lunch should be a time to socialize and get a break from their long days, but instead, children are returning to their classrooms, still hungry, overstimulated, and under-socialized. Our school's old, our bathrooms and plumbing are old. They are constantly being backed up, being flooded, and children are having to walk across the hallway and across the school to find a bathroom. We've lost our science lab to accommodate a second art room. Intervention has to pull children into hallways to work with them. ESL needs additional support, as we are one of the highest ESL rates in the district, if not the highest. TAG has been moved into lower-level TAG students are served out of a repurposed closet. FAC is down to 1 classroom, losing their mobility room. All students are being adversely affected. Okay. Thank you for your time. And I really do appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you, Ms. Sheffield. Up next will be Aaron Franz. I think that's the last one we have. Is that right? Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Erin Franz, and I'm a Caraway mom. I've got 2 kids there, a 2nd grader and a 5th grader. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight, and thank you for all that you do. Caraway is a neighborhood school in the truest sense. It sits in the heart of an old established neighborhood, and for over 40 years, it's been utilized and loved by neighbors, not just for educational purposes, but for a community gathering place and a resource and as an extension of Oakview Park. Caraway currently has 885 students crammed into a school building that was built in 1978, a school that has long since outgrown its original blueprint, and one that can no longer safely or effectively accommodate our students. Overcrowding, lack of facilities, and lack of adequate staffing is adversely affecting all Caraway students, including our most sensitive populations. You've received a detailed email outlining all of the concerns, but a few highlights. Our 5th grade class at Caraway is our smallest grade right now. We began the year with 26 to 28 students per class, yet the district denied multiple requests to hire a teacher prior to the start of the school year. That many children packed into small portable classrooms has resulted in never-before-seen at Caraway social, emotional, and academic difficulties for many students in this grade. The district did recently agree to hire a new teacher. However, doing so at this time is very disruptive, and respectfully, we can and we must do better. Due to the lack of space, teachers are spending more time on behavioral issues. Students can only visit the library twice a month. Music, art, and PE are all overcrowded, and PE is held simultaneously in 3 to 4 different locations across campus, in the bus lane and in the cafeteria, as you've heard. On inclement weather days, it's held in the hallways, and intervention is always being held in the hallways. A theme you'll continue to hear from families at Caraway is community, and sadly, it's the community that's being chipped away more and more each year. When my family began at Caraway, our school had numerous community events. We had Run Club, we had award ceremonies, we had a talent show, Thanksgiving, the list goes on. They've all been reduced or eliminated due to lack of space. The neighborhood is also becoming increasingly frustrated and upset with traffic and facility concerns and their loss of community space. Sadly, the current state is all that many Caraway families know. But for families like mine who've been there for 6 years, we know what a healthy community-based school should and can look like. Caraway is vibrant, diverse, and active, and is filled with people who give time, talent, and treasure. We've got an amazing faculty and staff, and we're a community of those who can do, but we're here to tell you that we can no longer do it alone. We need immediate assistance from you, the elected members of the Round Rock ISD School Board, and I want to thank Trustee Feller and Area Superintendent Becky Donald for coming to visit our campus, and invite all of you to do so during the day and come see what the issues we're talking about are, and that you're hearing in the letters and phone calls you're starting to receive. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Franz. Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, Dr. Flores.
Yes, we'll have Dr. Presley and Terry Wooster present boundary options and possible changes.
Thank you, Dr. Flores, President Chadwell, and trustees. Tonight we wanted to go through what our Facilities Committee discussed, I think it was a week ago Friday, at their last meeting on the 8th of November. And there are 4 changes, and as you've heard some tonight, we have schools in the district that are overcrowded, and we have some that are underpopulated, and so we're looking at some boundary adjustments for efficiency. Also, the 4 considerations that were discussed by the Facilities Committee is go ahead and look at the boundaries for Elementary 35 that will be on the east side of the district, the Elementary 35 that passed in the 2018 bond. Mr. Wooster and his team, along with our contractors, are well underway in planning that school that will open in the fall of 2021, correct, Mr. Wooster?
That is correct.
2021. And so getting ahead of the game a little bit by drawing the boundary of where the students will populate that new school when it opens that fall. So with that, I'm going to ask Terry just to kind of talk through, once again, there are 4 options, not options, there were 4 considerations for 4 different boundary adjustments, some for efficiency, 1 for a new school, and then some, we have 2 middle school concepts that we want to talk about to create peer feeder middle schools to some of our high schools. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wooster. I think you have a copy of the maps in front of you or in your packet. So.
Thank you, Dr. Presley. And so a quick comment in regard to boundaries is that the Facility and Finance Committee has been looking at boundaries for several months. We began looking at boundaries in in October, as well as we moved some of those discussions forward to November. And so what you see in your different packets are let's call them concept maps, draft maps that we covered with the Facility and Finance Committee. And as we look through those concept maps, again, it relates to four different reviews of different boundaries. Now, that's not to say that is just limited to those, but they represent for the new elementary school, and mostly it is fairly broad-stroked in that students for Elementary 35, as we call it, is in the Ryan's Crossing area, and those students in the Ryan's Crossing area will obviously attend Elementary 35, and there are other opportunities then to move students in the Vizcaya area to Terra Vista, and also be able to carve out some areas that makes sense for students that are currently attending the Harrington Elementary School to also attend Ryan's Crossing. And so there are some large areas that we've drawn some concept lines around so that we can balance those attendance areas. The other elementary school alignment that we are working on is England Elementary School. And England Elementary School is obviously overcrowded. It, along with other schools, are overcrowded. And so part of the solution for England Elementary School is to take the students that are currently attending England Elementary School in the Horizon neighborhood and move them to it's Horizon Heights neighborhood. Oh, I'm sorry, Highland Heights. Right. Yeah. Well, Highland.
You got to get this right, sir.
Yeah, Highland Heights.
This is unforgiving.
It's Highland Horizon.
These are unforgiving, sir. You get it right.
Highland Horizon. Now, this neighborhood is on the east side of 620, and these students in Highland Horizon are bus students, and they're currently boarding a bus and being bused directly to England. They're actually driving right past Great Oaks Elementary School. So we're proposing that neighborhood attend the Great Oaks neighborhood, and that aligns them with the Round Rock alignment as well. There's also two high-density residential or multifamily units in the England attendance zone, and they are near the Forest North boundary. And so we are looking at the opportunity to redefine the boundary for those two high-density areas, and those students could perhaps go to Forest North. And so that would balance some of the attendance at approximately 900 there at England Elementary School. So those are two considerations in that area. The other two are alignment opportunities, and that is with the students from C.D. Folks and within C.D. Folks and Berkman Elementary School. Berkman Elementary School students go to C.D. Folks, and then by changing an alignment, those students now would attend Cedar Ridge High School. Right now, the Berkman students who attend C.D. Folks, they end up going to Stony Point. So it is an alignment of that area. It's an alignment that was originally organized in that area for the Berkman students to go to Cedar Ridge. And then the other one is a smaller alignment, a change for Chisholm Trail students. And so there are a group of students that are south of the, the 45 freeway, and being able to align those so that those students can go to Round Rock High School rather than McNeil High School. And so those are the maps that we have, and or the graphics that have been produced and that you see. It should be noted to the public that these graphics are available for viewing as they're posted on the website under the Facility Finance Committee. And so that's where you'll find them, so you can actually go to those maps and view them. And so with that, then, the next step in this boundary change is to look at this as a preliminary look. It is not a final look. It is just a concept look at this point, and with the blessing and the authorization from the board, the FFC, we call the Facility and Finance Committee the FFC. And so to be able to say, yes, take these concept drawings and these suggestions to the public. And we plan to establish some public hearings starting in January. Our target dates are January 9th and January 14th, or at least in that early period of January, so that we can receive some public input and then be able to bring that back for full and formal recommendations to the entire Board of Trustees. And so that is the process that we're working on. And I know that Trustee I'm looking at Trustee Feller. Trustee Weir has a couple of comments, and so I defer to Trustee Weir.
Thank you. It's been pretty exciting. I do want to say to the people that are here speaking is that we're not done. We've just started this process of reviewing the data. I can't say anything about false applications because that's not a board, anything that's within our purview. I will say that the one thing that we've found is that the boundaries aren't simple, that there's federal law that is involved, especially where apartment complexes may have economically disadvantaged students, and one of the campuses is more economically disadvantaged than the other. So I know staff is really working very carefully on making sure the recommendations are going to not just follow state law, but also federal law, and be able to use our facilities. But we're not done. We are definitely still working on this, and it is going to be an ongoing process. And we may be bringing more back to the board. We do kind of have a tight time frame, so that may be something that we're going to talk to the policy committee about, giving us on some of these areas a little more than February, because right now the way our policy reads is we have to make all of our decisions between October and February, or before March 1st, I think technically is the way our policy reads. So that may be something that we need y'all to pick up that baton for us and give us a little bit more time, give staff a little bit more time as we're going through, because we do have to, our policy does require 2 public hearings. So we are going to definitely start those. And, hopefully, I know that some of us on the facilities committee are planning to go to them, and, hope that anybody will come if they want to, but this is just the start.
Okay, Mr. Moses and Ms. Filler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to thank you, Trustees Weir, Matt, and Feller, for your work on this. And just so you know, I already passed a note to Patty for the next PIV committee agenda to add boundary policy. So,
thank you. They thank you because we're running out of. We don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, and so I don't know. So, have we looked at, just so we know before we move forward, what this does to the numbers? Because I look at this and you kind of see some students who go, I love the vertical alignment. It all makes sense. Everything it logically makes sense. But I want to make sure that the students are moving south of 45 in the Chisholm Trail and the Round Rock High School, kind of balanced out with students are moving out that are at Berkman, going to Cedar Ridge. That way we're not dumping a lot of kids at one campus.
I can tell you, we've looked at the numbers. The thing about I'll talk about CD Fulks first. When Cedar Ridge first opened, all of CD Fulks went to Cedar Ridge, and because Cedar Ridge got so big so fast, within the second year of its existence, they had a boundary committee and they redirected the Berkman students to go to CD and then to Stony Point. Well, now with all of our projections from Templeton, Stony's growing faster than Cedar Ridge, and will continue to grow faster with that growth in that northeast corridor. And so the numbers do work on that. And as you said, the fact of having a peer feeder middle school to a high school, it pays a lot of dividends for the students and the staff. And the same thing at Chisholm Trail. There's a very small number of kids that go to Joe Lee Johnson Elementary, and then they're zoned to Chisholm Trail, and then they go to McNeil High School. And everybody else at Chisholm Trail goes to Round Rock High School. So there's about, I'm going to say, 30 kids in a class. Terry, do you remember
That's
the approximate number? Around?
I think I was going to say it was at least 30 or maybe even less.
Yeah, I'd
for
say
both of
25 to
them.
30 students in each grade that they follow the continuum with their Round Rock peers, and then they go to McNeil. So that's difficult, and that exists in some other places as well, but I think these two middle school boundaries were not the easiest ones, but none of it's easy, but the best ones to start with.
No, and I agree. Those are, again, and I love that they're getting. I never really liked the idea of kids going to middle schools and friends for a few years and those very awkward, uncomfortable years, and then being taken away from their friends.
And that was Dr. Presley.
Yeah.
That's actually why he brought it to us, because it's such a small group of kids at all of these middle schools that are then just going totally without support almost to their high school. And, our high schools aren't really small, so
Right.
to only have 35 kids or 30 or kids that you're going with, it's tough.
And I know this is just kind of the opening salvo.
Yeah.
There'll be more. I know there's at least one other feeder pattern that comes to mind. I'm sure there are others. Are those can be looked at potentially?
Okay,
in the
these are
future?
our start. Yeah, I think you had two
Yeah,
more.
at least two more. Yeah.
One of them's much harder than.
Yeah, I know. And then, okay, I think because I know there's more coming. Some are out of that, so I'll hold off.
All right, Ms. Feller, then Ms. Vessa.
Thank you, President Chadwell. I just wanted to, now hearing the dates that Terry's given us of a possible January 9th and a January 13th, I know that we don't currently have a facilities committee scheduled for December. I think I'd like to request that we try to get one on the books in December, because if you haven't taken a tour of Caraway lately, I know a lot of people will say, well, they're getting an expansion, but I spent Saturday at Elsa England at the Elementary Student Council Leadership Conference, and then the next Friday went to Caraway, and while both of them are considerably overcrowded, Elsa England has high ceilings. It has wide spaces between classrooms for community groups. It has a combination gym and cafeteria that you can open up together. And while it's not great to do gym on the cafeteria flooring because it's not designed for that, there's just a lot of... Caraway has one lunch line. So even if you put room and you're actually putting a physical building for these 900 kids, you're trying to get 900 kids through one lunch line. And so there's a lot of concerns, and I'm not sure that even just adding another wing or an extension to Caraway is going to solve all of those problems, because the shared spaces aren't going to get any bigger. And while the day that I was there, I have to say I love Caraway's gym. It is amazing, but it's tiny. It's tiny. And the day I was there were only about 25 kids playing volleyball in there, and it was great because it was quiet. There were 10 kids on each court, but the all other 100 were outside on the outside fields because it was a lovely day. And imagining that on a nasty day with that gym full of kids, there's just some other resources that just getting an expansion is not going to help with those kinds of things. So if we're looking at a public hearing on January 9th and 13th, if we haven't reviewed the Caraway options, and we may decide not to. I'm not saying that this is a promise that it's going to be changed, but I do think that we need to go back and re-examine it with a lot more detail to make sure that we're doing some justice to that area. And it may not be the neighborhoods that everybody thinks it might be. It might affect other neighborhoods. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a maps person, but I really think that we should evaluate maybe putting another facilities committee meeting in for December to evaluate that option.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we can get. And I know that Terry was also talking to the architects and trying to look at not just the cafeteria fix, but some with the roads and all of that. I know that it's on their radar. So,
Trustee Weir and Trustee Feller, that is correct. Is in that there's a design professional team that's working, obviously, on bond projects that are associated with Caraway, and so as we made that assignment to the design professionals, we also said, I need for you to expand, and I've authorized them to expand their thinking to say, not just look at bond projects which include HVAC and roofing and things of that nature, but bring back to me some solutions for a greater good of the school in the neighborhood.
Okay, good. More lights here, so go ahead.
Sorry, so you're saying that it might actually look into expanding some of these additional facilities as well.
That's correct.
And not just looking at classrooms.
That's correct.
Okay, I just make sure I was hearing exactly that.
Core there, the group. All right, Mr. Math, I think, then Ms. Vesa, and then Ms. Gonzalez.
Okay, thanks. I just had two questions on Caraway. One is a curiosity question. The other's more of an update question. The curiosity question is, how did we get here? I'm very familiar with the area, and it's a mature area. I don't see any lots, and was just curious how we got to the current situation.
Well, I can say that as time goes along, and of course the discussion for 2018 bond was focused on a lot of renewal and renovation, and so consequently Caraway had several assignments for renewal and renovation related to HVAC or heating, cooling, roofing, things of that nature. Replacement of portables by way of new construction with classrooms, but it didn't advance through the CBC discussions that let's look at that from an expansion point of view. And a lot of school sites did not advance in that conversation, obviously because of budget constraints within that.
Yeah, I was asking more from a demographic perspective. Is it purely that we just have a lot of families there that have small kids where that wasn't always the case?
The answer to that, Trustee Math, is that there's two parts to that question, and an answer in that question. Is one, the Caraway neighborhood is not expanding as you would find an expansion, obviously. And so I guess the terminology that we'd use is the yield of students per household changes. And so, for example, a typical new residential area may have what we'd call a 0.5, 0.7 students per household or rooftop, and that would be the yield of the students in perhaps a new area. The yield in the Caraway area is increasing from those smaller numbers to higher numbers, such as 0.8, 0.9, maybe even 1 to 1.1. And that's how the student growth is changing at that particular campus.
I think to further answer your question, I think it's sometimes neighborhoods will turn over and age, where the population becomes more mature. It's such a great neighborhood and a high-quality area that younger families are buying homes in there. It's a place that's sought after by many people that live in the Austin area. So consequently, young families move in, too, that have younger children. It's not – some of our neighborhoods, get older and people stay there, so you end up having an older population. But I don't think that's happening in Caraway. I think it's such a sought-after place and a lot of great families. It's just a great area to live.
Hey, did you have another question?
Yeah, and then the other question was just a general reminder and update as to what we voted for in the 2018 bond and what the general timing is on that.
Yes, originally, and I'm turning to a page to answer your question specifically, Mr. Math, is that originally the Caraway project focused within bond HVAC, and so there was budgets for an entire new cooling system, if you will. Roofing was budgeted there, as well as there was architectural improvements for cafeteria and gymnasium, as we've talked about, as well as addition to the school to remove the portables off campus. And so that's the nut. There's some smaller parts to that, but that's the nut of the 2018 bond.
But how much brick and mortar capacity are we creating?
The brick and mortar capacity is not changing the school. It's only reducing. Well, the brick and mortar is, we have students in portables, and so when we change the brick and mortar capacity, we change the capacity for those 10 classrooms there at the school.
Okay, Ms. Bessa, then Ms. Gonzalez.
I can ask that if you want. Just as a follow-up to that, what's the timeline for the construction on Caraway?
The rule of thumb is that it takes the same amount of time to build a project on paper as it does to build it in real. And so the bond projects were scheduled for second year. And so as we have just gone through the second year bond sales, we had started the design professionals early, and so that they could get a start on that. And of course, now the second year bonds have been sold, and funding will be available to the district in December 19th. And so we have also selected the builder, and so those processes have begun. It takes, as mentioned at the podium, it takes some time to be able to put the design together and permit it. For example, this project is in the city of Austin, and so permitting in the city of Austin is quite time-consuming, particularly on this site, simply because depending on the formation of an expansion by way of brick and mortar, there's numerous trees on the site. And so there are ordinances to save trees. And so this is a complicated and a needy project. And so there are opportunities in good design. And so we have a very good designer that's assigned to this project.
Okay.
That wasn't actually my question, though. I was asking hers.
What's that? I was going to say, go ahead.
So,
quick, 'cause- okay. Sorry.
back to England. So we have two apartment complexes. Is it two apartment complexes?
It is
That
two.
would be zoned for Forest North. And what is the student enrollment in those two apartment complexes?
The current amount of students that we can ascertain that are in those two areas, and I'm going to open my file here to look for that information.
Can I make a recommendation that we not burden them too much with the details tonight? I just want to make sure we get the process started.
Okay.
Is that all right? I really want to.
Well, can you follow up with me?
I'd be happy
And
to.
I want to make a point, though, a little bit. Forest North and Caraway are the same school. Okay, they're the same design. If you go to Caraway and you go to Forest North, you walk into the same building. They look exactly the same. Same with Voight and Spicewood. They're exact same building. Same with Union Hill and Canyon Creek. They look exactly the same. So I'm just concerned at adding a ton of students at Forest North because actually the Caraway actually has a bigger cafeteria than Forest North. The problems if we add a lot of students to Forest North, it's a really small school. It's actually considerably smaller than Caraway. So I was just concerned. Like I'm intimately familiar with Caraway because I'm at Forest North every single week because I'm a literacy partner there, and so I know that they look exactly the same. So I understand when Trustee Feller was talking about it. Well, one, I did go to Caraway, and that's how I noticed that they looked exactly the same. But there's issues there, and both schools are the only schools that I know of, elementary schools, that don't have stages. So there's going to have to be some changes, and I think there's money in the bond to address those things. That there's a quality of facilities at both of these schools because they are, both Forest North and Caraway don't have the same necessarily, like, they don't have cafeterias that are equivalent to other elementary schools in the district, or open spaces that are equivalent to other elementary schools in the district. So these are things that we have to address at both those schools, and I'm just a little concerned about putting too many more students at Forest North. But I'm also very interested in, our discussions in terms of Caraway too, and accommodating their growth.
Okay, so I was going to say, we've got a lot to discuss on these, a lot of options, so I know we're going to look at all those, but I've got a couple more questions here. And again, I'm expecting if you do a meeting in December, facilities meeting, to get this started, and then we have the public hearings. I hope this gets more detail on this. But Ms.
I can't ask questions at those facilities
You can.
meetings.
I think we have that as an option. Yes, you can.
Oh, I can
Yep.
ask questions?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Gonzalez, and then Mr. Moses again.
Okay, I'm pretty good at reading maps, but I'm not good at reading maps without street names, and I'm not good at understanding populations in schools if they're not on here.
Right.
So this really doesn't help me at all. I need to know how many kids we would take out of this school and where would we put them, and then I need to know what their capacities are, because this is like not really very helpful to me.
Right.
And also, I agree with Trustee Feller, if we, like another meeting, and we could address Caraway's needs and maybe combine this and do it all at the same time. And I wanted to know, these maps, they were prepared by?
They were prepared by our demographer, Templeton Demographics.
Yeah, it would at some point probably be a good idea if we had an update from them. I can't remember the last time we've had to look at projections of growth throughout the district.
Right. Trustee Gonzalez, I should mention that we went through the attendance numbers in the first look, so we know what students are in certain areas. And so
Yeah, but I don't know.
Yeah, exactly right. And so we're going to add those to those maps
thank you.
in more detail.
Okay, Mr. Moses again.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, I want to kind of echo Trustee Vesta's comments, because I was thinking the same thing. I want to make sure that we're solving a problem at one campus by providing relief, but then moving those kids, and then even it may not be immediate, but the demographics where in 2 years, now we create the exact same problem that we just tried to solve, just at a different campus. We're not now moving those kids a second time. So yeah, this again.
That's why we need to look at
exactly, just looking
projections.
at numbers. And then, so I think we're all on the same page there. And then this is the last comment. About a year ago, I met with Councilmember Jimmy Flanagan out of Austin. He talked about the city was looking at some ways to help schools streamline some of their construction projects. So I'm sure you know that. I just wanted to say that I believe that's still an option out there, especially if we move forward with Caraway.
Yeah, Trustee Moses, that is true. There is an intergovernmental agreement with City of Austin to streamline as many projects through.
Okay. Mr. Math again.
Yeah, I know there were a couple of suggestions made that maybe we ought to have another facilities committee meeting. I think we should just have a workshop. It sounds like all the trustees have some very appropriate input.
I agree with that.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that'd be good. That way we can all participate. I've got a couple comments, questions in here. So again, I like the maps. I do like the idea of street names, but if you go to the boundary online, if you look at the skill boundaries, that does a pretty good job. So compare those, but it'd be good to have the numbers that you're talking about. Another option I'd like for us to consider is a K through 2 and the 3 through 5 option, whether we do that or not, or whether the school district does that. At least put that out there for the public to look at it and say, I'm talking about K through 2 at one campus, or fifth grade, I think was the other one. The topic was have a fifth grade center. And again, that doesn't have to be, I'm not recommending any one particular feeder pattern or district, but I would like for us to know that. I'd also like for the district, even though it may not be in our purview as board members, but I'd like to know that there is a policy that people aren't abusing the system with bringing in water bills or whatever, exploiting the system and either doubling up, being on a campus where they really don't live in that campus. We get the water, we get the daily allowance for it, which is great, but when it impacts so much, when there's so many students at a campus where they can't have regular functions, and I'm thinking the big, way overcrowded campuses that need to be considered for that. So, just like with athletics, I know that if somebody says, "Hey, I live in this school, this feeder pattern," the athletics, they go out and they find out, does this family really live in this house? Are they really claiming? I know it's a touchy subject, and there are multiple families and multiple generations that live in one household, but just want to make sure that we've at least addressed that and we're aware of it. let's see, the other one I had was a lot of these boundary changes that we've made over the years, because we have hot spots in the district, across the district, that are fast growth and that are very either turnover, like the Caraway, or areas behind, I think it's called Preston, which is between La Frontera and Jolie Johnson. I think that's part of the area we were talking about earlier. Kind of goes up behind Wells Branch in that area. That place is, every time I go by there, there's a brand new apartment or brand new multiple streets going in there. So things that when you make a boundary change today, in 2 years, just like you're saying earlier, it could be, everything could be out of balance. And I'll use the reference of Cedar Ridge when we opened that in 2009. If you all are going to go watch some meetings, go back in the March, April, May meetings we had here. People were, you talk about painful, moving high school boundaries is probably the most painful thing we will do as a board. You all will do, everybody will do as a board eventually, because people get entrenched in their school feeder pattern. No matter how much it needs to be done, you have to make it. We had committees, we had 3 plans that were brought to the board, and there's A, B, and C, and by the end of it, people were holding up A2, B2, B3. They were holding up J, K. It got way down the line. Said move. They were saying move that neighborhood, move somebody else. Don't move my neighborhood. And I give credit to the committee that brought it forward. We made a vote. It was hard. It was painful for 4 or 5 months, whatever it was when we voted. I think it was in May until August when the doors opened at Cedar Ridge. People were furious at the board. They said, "I'm not going to that school." They withdrew. And 6 weeks into the school, not a peep. There was one family that just would not let it go, but everybody else got going. So there's some magic dust that the teachers have that they sprinkle on all the kids when they come into a new classroom and a new campus. It's painful at first, but once you get it done, it works, and it works great. And I'll say that 2 years, so we moved some students out of McNeil feeder pattern in Round Rock, and we moved them into Cedar Ridge. 2 years later, it exploded in growth over there. We went back to the neighborhoods and said, "Hey, give you an opportunity to move back." And they said, No, we're not moving. We like it. And it was not just to Cedar Ridge. It was McNeil to Round Rock and vice versa. They said, "No, we love it." So keep that in mind as we go through this process. It will be painful, but in the long run, it has to be done right. And we need to do this on a regular basis. And we need to have a policy that says when a campus gets 125% and it looks like it's going to keep growing, we make a change as soon as possible.
And who was the principal at Cedar Ridge when that opened?
I kept looking at it, so I'm going to say Dr. Presley was the principal, and he did not know what he was getting into when he was hired, and but it worked. I'm going to say that, and it came, and everybody who's gone through it, and I look around here in the group, and I recognize a few faces that are still here when went through that. It was very painful. As we went through Pearson Ranch opening, what was that, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, the boundary. That was tough too, but now everybody's pretty happy. So there's always room for improvement, but it works. So anyway, whatever we do today or in January is likely to change. And with, as mentioned earlier, this Apple facility going in and people turning over, the neighborhoods turning over, you can get a good estimate, but there's no guarantee that what you do today is going to actually happen. So if somebody comes back and says, "See, you were wrong on that number," so you just have to shrug our shoulders and say, "We did the best we could with the info we had. We had to make a decision." Anyway, Ms. Vesta, thank you.
So I would just put out there that I think that when we come back for this workshop, which I think is a great idea in December, that we also talk about what are our kind of guiding board principles as we consider boundary discussions. Like, what is our most important
We do have a charter, I think.
consideration?
Is that still there? We had a charter when we did the boundaries before, and we looked at things about don't cross major highways, demographic imbalance, growth forecasting. So,
And I think that's one thing that before that workshop, since the PIBS meeting the Monday after Thanksgiving, we can kind of do kind of how the facilities committee did a first pass at the boundaries and did a great job. We can take a kind of a first pass at the policy and make some notes for some discussion points when we get together at that workshop. Well, we have a policy regarding boundaries, but we can look at that and make this all be part of one thing.
okay, so we're not here to solve the boundaries tonight. We just want to get the process, and I've heard some great things. We're going to have a workshop where all the board members will be there, the facility, the administration, and we'll open it up. We'll take comment. We'll have to take comment, right? We will be able to take public comment, and I would like to recommend that we have some sort of online Google Doc or SurveyMonkey that Again, I know that we got a lot of emails that we sent, and I think I read through a lot of them, but I guarantee I haven't read all of them. So anyway, we get the message, and we're getting it. We're listening. We can't change things on a dime, but we've got multiple campuses we need to address in areas that we need to look at as time goes on. And then the whole thing over on the northeast side of the district there's a lot of changes going out there too. So, all right.
I do want to say just one more thing.
Sure.
I was super impressed with the Caraway community's advocacy. I'm always up here saying, you need to advocate, you need to reach out, you need to email, you need to call. They did. They did it in numbers. And every time I got another email, I was like, yes, they are advocating. They are taking a stand for what they want. They're engaging in this process. That is exactly what I want to see. Keep doing it. And I highly encourage all the communities to do that. If you don't communicate with us, we don't know. You have to communicate with us. We are not mind readers. And so please keep emailing us. Keep reaching out. We want the feedback. At least I do.
Okay. All right. We've done anything else on that?
They're like, and that is, you can give your feedback to Corey_Fessa. Don't click on that. No,
That's right.
Just joking.
Right. No, we all need to see it. We might need to have another methodology, but again, appreciate your feedback. And this is a great impetus. We talked about that last week with Dr. Flores' evaluation. We said one of his goals was to bring to the board a plan and a methodology to look at boundaries on a regular basis when the school gets over capacity, because it affects the bond, how much money we spend on building new facilities, busing back and forth. It's not good to have a school at 150% capacity and another one just a few miles away that's at 75% capacity or 50% capacity. It's our fiscal and fiduciary responsibility to look at all that. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. So with that, we're going to reschedule at the end of the meeting. We'll schedule a meeting for the a committee and take the public comments. And I might recommend we try to have a meeting, if we can broadcast it, at maybe one of these overcrowded campuses, that if we can broadcast it there. It's always good. I like to have, we've done that a few times. We go to other campuses and we have the workshops at those. And I know you went through it when we had it at Cedar Valley, when we had the bond oversight committee, bond study committee, and then over at Round Rock High School and then Cedar Ridge High School and then Cedar Valley. So anyway. Okay, so with that, let's go to agenda item H. Consideration by consent. And Dr. Howard, you'll be impressed with how fast we go through this. So, Mr. Moses.
Mr. President, I move we adopt action items H1 through H9 by consent.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for H1 through H9 by consent. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate your input. Any further discussion? I don't think there's anything in here that... yes, ma'am. Anything? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 7-0. Great. Action items, none. Okay. And then announcements. J1, Facilities and Finance.
I will go super quick because most of our committee meeting has already been discussed. We also had our financial update from Dr. Audix about the bond sale during our meeting. We did talk about CD Folks and McNeil Phase 2 and had presentations on both of those. So anyone that's curious can go back and watch and see some great presentations. I don't think either of those plans are posted. It's on our site, right?
They were updating some of the renderings, and so they will be.
Okay. We also talked briefly about the Westwood Athletic Facilities concept, about locker rooms for safety. There are some City of Austin issues that staff is going to have to work up. And hopefully that'll be back on our agenda soon. We also had updates from the Facility Use Sustainability Energy Committee. Mr. Hodebeck's not here, but they are getting that going. So that's, we weren't really able to say when we had our one speaker, but staff is actually doing a great job looking at sustainability and getting that going. We talked about the 620 improvements briefly, augmented staff. Terry is going to be getting a little bit of extra help, and I know that they're looking forward to that, just temporary staff, not hiring new staff, but to help with the different bond projects that are going around. So hopefully that'll get everything back on track. And that we had said no December meeting, but now we need everybody to pull up their calendar. I've already got mine.
So this is for your facilities committee? You're talking
Nope,
about the
this is for the workshop. So we're not going to have a facilities committee. Terry is going to be gone the week of the 9th, which was one of the reasons we were not going to have a facilities committee. So that's going to give us just a few days that are available. Because we already have level 3. Well, that's the 12th, so it doesn't matter. So I guess the 5th is really our only Thursday if Mr. Math is going to be there.
Don't plan on the 5th. I can't make that. That's the only Thursday I can't make.
I can't make the 5th either.
Okay. Well, so then, is it okay if we meet without you, Mr. Math?
You could meet without me. I promise to provide my input beforehand.
I can't be there either.
No, I know that.
Yeah.
But that way we can have other dates because
Gotcha. Okay,
he can only do Thursdays. So, and we've already got the 12th and the 19th. I'm assuming nobody wants to come on the 26th. So, since there's no school.
Oh man, that'd be.
We could do Monday the 9th or the 10th.
No, Terry's not
Oh,
here
right,
that,
he's
that
not.
whole
He's gone
week.
that week.
So, like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 16th, 17th, what does that look like for you, Terry?
The 2nd, we have our PIB meeting.
Oh, you have your PIB meeting.
But we
Okay.
could do the
You-
3rd.
The
I was gonna
16th?
say, do you want to move the PIB? Because this is, yeah.
Some other time.
Well, I don't know. Do you have your calendar out, Mr. Worcester?
Oh, yeah, we can move.
And you guys, your staff needs a little bit of time too. Would it be easier, like would the 16th,
16th?
or 17th be easier for you?
Trustee Weir, I'd prefer the later in the month.
Okay,
The
so
16th?
how does the 16th work?
16th.
If I can.
Okay, yeah.
16th, yeah, that's good.
And
Okay.
Nikki, how about,
I'm good.
are you good? So the 16th then, can we put that down? All right,
So that gives us meetings on the 16th and the 19th that week.
yeah.
Yay.
What a great way to end the year.
Merry
Well,
Christmas.
this kind of stuff's important, so.
No, I agree. I'm just-
It's just a little extra time away from your family, so you appreciate all the quality time that you will have over the following 2 weeks.
Okay, so the 16th.
All right.
Set it for 5:30 for right now, but we need to tweak it. All right, is that it, Ms. Weir?
That is it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll mention this later on. Mr. Moses, on policy innovation.
I'll be quick. Meeting Monday after Thanksgiving, so the 5th. We'll be talking about boundaries and the policy there. Second, sorry. Thank you. Sorry, got my days all wrong. So that will be, and on boundaries, just feel free to grab me afterwards if I missed something here. But on that policy, we'll be looking at the timeline for when we handle things, be looking at triggers as far as certain populations, and then also I would recommend at least looking at grandfathering and see if there's anything we need to do there for help students in that transition. We can talk through. I'm not saying.
Yeah, and one of the other things, and I don't know if Terry wants to say, but we did have like some small pockets of people that had. One of them was actually in my neighborhood where literally everybody gets a transfer because where the neighborhood is, the streets, like it's just a few streets the way they're situated, and to have a whole 2 full hearings and all of that. I don't even, you had said it would be so much nicer if we could just have something in our policy that would let us, if it's just a few streets and there's nobody that's going to complain, if we could just
Yeah, I
do it.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. And then also we talk looking at budget safeguards, things they have in place right now to make sure we're being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. The sustainability policy, we're looking at that, as well as getting feedback from the DAC and the Equity Task Force on AE Local.
Okay, thank you. Announcements, request for future. Again, this kind of goes back to the facilities. I was at Robertson today. I'm trying to get back onto the schedule of visiting campuses I haven't been to in a while. They have no shaded, and I don't know what the plan is for new playgrounds, but one of the teachers said the first 6 weeks or so, again, Miss, thank you for being there. Anyway, it was great to see it. The classrooms are awesome, but it just still breaks my heart to think that we have some campuses with 3 shaded, brand new playgrounds and some that are just blistering hot. They can't even play on them, is what I heard. So I don't know. I don't need an answer tonight, but I just hope that's in the plans for all of our campuses to get the new playground, the surface, and the cover as soon as possible. So thank you for that. I will mention Dr. Presley told me earlier that announcement that Lisa Roebuck, who is our Director of Fine Arts, the district, won the TMEA, Texas Music Educator Association, Music Administrator of the Year Award. Is that right? Which is quite, I think, 1,200 districts across the state. She was recognized, which kind of makes me think of all the bands that did well over the last few weeks up in Indianapolis, at San Antonio. Just so much going on in the Fine Arts Department. So keep up the good work with all that. So.
And our Assistant Director of Fine Arts was selected to be the one of the directors for the Rose Bowl band marching.
Right.
Not saying all the words correctly, but they announced it at the.
That's because Round Rock High School marched in it 4 years ago or so, 3-4 years ago, and they amazed them, I guess. So they invited him back. Okay. All right. And then one of the things that we talked about doing. We got the calendar, and then we're going to go back in. We're going to adjourn here in open session. We're going to go back in and finish up in closed session, and then we can do that. So, anything else, Dr. Flores?
Yeah, just one quick announcement. Terry quarterbacked the $464 million bond sale just this week, and that's the largest bond sale in the. I'm sorry, Kenneth. Did I say Terry?
Terry was busy with other
sorry,
things.
Terry, you're amazing. Terry's working on boundaries, but $464 million and really successful bond sale. So you want to just real quickly?
Right. Give you some quick highlights on that. So it was not only the largest sale in the district's history, but it was also the largest school district bond sale in the state. This year, sale was very successful. We sold $464 million. Our total all-in interest cost was less than 2.15%. And then, so we sold all the remaining authorization of the 2018 bond. We also did a refunding, which is refinancing $138 million worth of Build America bonds that were originally sold in 2010. That refunding saved taxpayers $16.7 million. It's very strong demand for our bonds. They were oversubscribed by 2.2 times. Would like to definitely thank our financial advisor firm of Estrada Hinosa. Went up there with them on Monday, did the sale on Tuesday. We had 7 underwriting firms that did the sale for us, as well as bond counsel. And then also wanted to share with you that not only was it successful on the financial side, but we were the only, to my knowledge, we're the only district in the state that in our sale, we pushed this out to the classrooms and allowed our CTE classrooms to see the sale that was going on as well. So got a couple of pictures from that. So last Thursday, went to McNeil High School and taught 2 CTE classes there on that day. And then this was the actual room where we were in. But the screen that you see on the left-hand side, so this was at Citi's trading floor. Citi was our lead underwriting firm. So on Tuesday when we did the sale, and you can kind of make out those bar charts up there. Well, our students at the 5 campuses were seeing that exact same feed. So as the orders were coming in, students were seeing that. There were representatives from the underwriting firms and from our bond counsel that were talking to the students, actually talking through them how what was involved with the sale as it was coming in. You see that we were on the trading floor. It said, "Hey, Round Rock, Citi welcomes you." So that was pretty cool. And then had representative at Westwood at each of the classes. So Stony Point, all 5 campuses had that there. So great, hit it out of the park in terms of what we were able to do from the bond sale piece, but then also getting the students involved and let them actually seeing it from a learning experience.
And you did this negotiated instead of competitive, right, this time?
Yep.
And I know we had a big discussion, and that worked out well, though.
Right, it did.
Okay. We had 2 sales this year, which is, right?
That's right.
Okay, we're all done? You sold all your bonds?
We're all done.
All you sold?
Money will be in the bank on December the 19th.
Okay.
We're ready to work on the next one.
That's right.
Okay. All right. With that, we're going back into closed session. We got one more topic to discuss.
Clarify that.
So, what's that? You're kidding. So it is 10:31. We are out of open session. We're going to come back in here. We'll come back in and we'll adjourn later on.